to start our meeting with a special roundtable discussion about science and culture. You know that science and culture are uh, two sides of human practice and style of behavior, which makes us different from animals. Uh, it is believed that science is mostly dealing with mind activity and culture and art with our sensory activity. And during our first session, and actually also today, we are mostly discussing the scientific approach of reality. And to make some balance during our roundtable discussion, we will discuss also culture and art and their connections with science and with other sides of our life. The line of our discussion actually will be again the direction of developing of our civilization in integral way. We would like to discuss about the possible integral approach in science and culture, which are making possible to transfer our civilization to be peaceful, to be harmonious, and actually to reach the step of single super organism. That's actually the goal of our institute. So let us start our discussion, and I will uh, transfer the mic to Lucian, please.
Thank you, Professor Aliev. It's a great pleasure to be here, everyone. Maybe some of you may not know, in another life, I, I work as a scientist, as a chemist, particularly. And so to be here is a great pleasure. So I welcome you all. We'll be in for a wonderful couple of hours. So I sit back, relax, enjoy. Um, Write questions to us in the social media. Feel free to let me know anything that you'd like to let us know as we go through. Again, this is a learning experience. Science and art and culture, as Professor Eliev said, are wonderful parts of making us aware of our world. So today we have the roundtable. I will ask the question. We have 45 minutes, which seems like a long time, but it can go quickly if everyone, answers the questions that we have. So for the roundtable, I ask each of the participants to speak briefly. I'll try to keep everything on time. Each question, we have 4 questions. We have about 10 minutes. So the panelists, please try to keep your comments short and to the point. And if I need to, I will keep it on pace by politely interrupting. So the first question that we have in science and art in the formation of integral perception of the world for our panelists is, do the achievements of science help us feel fulfilled with life? Can the achievements, in other words, of science only make a person happy? Again, do the achievements of science help us feel fulfilled with life? Can the achievements of science only make a person happy? I think it's not Sergey. Sergey, are you there for translation?
Да,
Good.
перевод.
Okay. Okay. All right. I suppose let me put that in the chat for everyone. Is it already in the chat? Okay. So, okay. Is any of the panelists ready? Yeah, we please.
If you allow me, I can come in.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Sunil, you're very welcome.
Yeah. This is Sunil from Dubai. Greetings from Dubai to all of you, to all over the world. Thank you so much for this very thought-provoking question. It's not an easy answer, but my personal view is yes and no. Yes, in many, many ways, science and technology has significantly improved our quality of life, our happiness, makes goods and products and services accessible, knowledge accessible. You see, impact of science and technology has really been there in the last 50, 70 years back. Even in 1950s, there was very low literacy. Half the world was in extreme poverty. So it's the science and technology which has enabled the prosperity reach far and wide to all corners of the world. As the recent vaccination has shown us, in 1 year, due to extensive collaboration, vaccine for COVID-19 was produced. Compared to it took 100 years to produce vaccine for polio. Now, this is the positive side of it. I also say no, because life is not complete with science alone. Spirituality, connection to the nature, let's say just simple music or just a walk in the woods makes our life so much enriching. The love, the affection, the emotional bond, the social support system from our family and friends in difficult times. These things can never be replaced. The interaction, the connection I have with the people, it brings tremendous sense of joy, satisfaction, and also sense of purpose. So, in my view, to conclude, we need both. It is not either and or, it is and. So, with this, I share my thoughts with you. Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you, Professor Tawani. Perfect. So, may I ask in the audience there, who are the panelists we have out there? Can you identify yourself so I can choose you? So, we have Professor Pines, Elliot. Who else is out there? Anyone else? Okay. We'll go Professor Pine. Please feel free.
Okay. I hope this is not sounding too negative, but no, for two interconnected reasons, both of which, are, by the way, are exactly what IWRI seeks to address and largely what attracted me to volunteer with the Institute in the first place. The first is the overarching corruption of human ego, and the second is the limitation of the sensory and mental apparatus of the individual. Ironically, that very limitation is foisted upon us by the ego and also causes its corruption. It is human intelligence, particularly represented by our science, that has steered humanity away from paths of integral communication and collective intelligence, ubiquitous in the natural world and responsible for its integral homeostasis. At the human level, such would correspond to each of us using our special characteristics in a unique manner to help all of society, exactly what Eudaimonic happiness, true happiness, and a full life is all about. Instead, human ego's brute bias for selfish superiority and immediate gratification destroys this through the unbalanced power of individuals and oligarchic groups in almost every human organization. Instead, we are marched helplessly into social and natural doomsday scenarios, growing as weeds out of the present science. In this, are we really any smarter than the cancerous tumor, clever enough to metastasize, but without access to the global system intelligence that it is digging its own grave rather than moving towards a greater life? Einstein spoke well. We'll need a jump in our intelligence to save ourselves. At the end of his life, he concluded, like Freud before him, that ego makes the situation hopeless. However, there is something that they didn't know in their time. This is the possibility of integral education, where the ego is educated simultaneously with the integration of collective intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a couple of others. We have Leia Mandler, if you would care to join in.
Yes, thank you. I would like to a little bit to add and also to a little bit contradict whatever was said until now. First of all, my answer is a big yes. And that will be because the ability to do science makes human race, it gives us the ability to recognize patterns, to understand how the world around us work. And there is a lot of satisfaction that we can draw from those understandings. Not only people who have the predisposition to enjoy understanding patterns, but also when we realize that this is everything, everything is a part of a larger system, that we are a part of it. And then it also influences the way that we view ourselves and the loneliness that we experience. If we experience that we are part of something larger, something bigger through the science, then we can really draw some satisfaction out of it. But I would also like to add something about the word only, because science is never alone. Science is never only. It's always in a context, and that context is social. It is also biological. It is also I'm sorry, I'm not biological. It is also technical. It has a lot of other things attached to the science alone. So we really cannot speak about science in without thinking about other things that are related to it and that are drawn together. So I think yes. Thank you.
Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you, Leah. Perfect. Lots to do in science. Yes, lots to integrate. So we have one other speaker, one other panelist, Svetlana Yashuk. Are you able to join us on this question? Svetlana, yes, are you there? I see your window. Okay, perhaps she's away for a moment. It's no problem. We can go on to the next question. The next question for the panelists is: the duality of the world a necessary principle of interaction between science and art in the perception of reality? In other words, can the interaction of rationality and sensuality, as well as collectivity, become the key to an integral perception of reality? Again, is the duality of the world a necessary principle of interaction between science and art in the perception of reality? In other words, can the interaction of rationality and sensuality, as well as a collectivity, become the key to an integral perception of reality? I'm going to put that in the chat for everyone. So with that question, maybe we can start again, go back to Sunil, if you'd like to pose an answer to that. Oh, you're muted, Sunil. Professor Tawani, you're muted.
Yeah, good. Thank you for the opportunity, but it would be nice if somebody else takes the lead. I don't want to be on.
Sure. Anybody
it's okay
who
with
wants
you.
to.
Yeah.
No, of course, of course. Who would like to join? Jump in.
If no one else, okay.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, actually, most definitely it can. Science and rationality are essentially reductionist in perspective, while art and sensuality are essentially holistic. Perhaps the ultimate lesson of quantum gravity, the unification of quantized and relativistic perspectives and cognitive science, will prove that reality and its perception are one and the same. The superposition of parts and whole is integral reality, and that of mind and sensation is perceiver.
Thank you, Professor Pines. Beautiful answer. Do we have any others who would like to jump in? This is quite an involved question for sure. Is there anyone who would like to take a stab at this on the panel? And I encourage also yesterday's panelists, Ernst, Kalechi, Gregory, Alina, if you'd like to join in, please feel free. This This is the $1,000,000 question, it sounds like.
I see that Leia is
Leia, please.
ready. Yes.
Please.
Yes, thank you. That's actually one of, you probably heard, there is a movement of non-duality, which gathers scientists and people from various walks of life who really they deal with this question. It's a really interesting, important question. So my answer would be that there is duality. It's necessary, but it is an illusion. It's not real. Okay, like we humans we are comprised of two essential parts. We have the ability, the cognitive ability, and we also have the emotional ability. But the two are not separate. They are connected. And this is why when we interpret the reality around us, we need both, and we are also influenced by both. So the way that we experience the world, the sensitive part is actually connected to our cognitive functions, and also our cognitive functions are really influenced by the way that we experience the world, the emotional part of the human being. So there has to be duality for us to try and understand how everything works. We need this, like in science, for example, we need disciplines, but we don't really need them because the reality is not divided into chemistry and physics, etc. But when we are studying ourselves, when we are studying the reality, we need this division, but essentially it doesn't really exist, and we need to connect everything into one when we really want to understand it.
Yeah. Thank you. If may I come in, Dr. Lucia?
Sure. Yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Tawani, please.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting and not an easy question, because mind keeps on oscillating between reality and illusion. I think that's the way I think the brain is designed, and at times both elements are needed to sense what's happening, circumstances around it. I don't know, some thoughts are going in the mind. I don't know how directly relevant they are to the question. On one side, we depend a lot on science, and yet we also depend on kind of prayers and God, and we go back to the spirituality, basically. Sometimes, when there was a time 100 years back, whenever somebody fell sick or was hit by polio or some disease, people were mostly praying to the God to come out of it. As the science evolved, the belief shifted to a large extent towards science, and we also go to the doctor. And then again, we still go back to the God and say, please help me overcome this difficulty. And the picture is complete only when we look at both sides of the duality. I mean, I don't know how accurately I have been put my thoughts, but the both are needed to enjoy the expression, the emotion, the thoughts, the experience, the data, the analytics, the science, the systems, the structures. So that's my thought on this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So, Dr. Tawani, let me follow up, because you bring up a very good point on that question. Do you feel that there's a strong dependence on the evolution of the second part of your answer in order for a society to be fully developed, to be fully realized?
You see, it's a very interesting and difficult question. You see, a lot of it emanates from my own beliefs. For example, if I've studied engineering and science and I'm a scientist, my views will be more towards belief in science. Right? If you go take Professor Hawkins. Now, if you take a purely spiritual person, for example, in India, we have a lot of spiritual people living in the mountains and spending a lot of time in divine life society and spirituality. Their perception may be very different. In the end, they may have a very strong bias towards prayers and voice of the God, and how the God has shaped this world and things like that. it's not easy to have a balanced, objective view. That's why I say both are needed. I, for one, believe a lot in science and technology. I mean, in short, that's what I would like to put it.
Perfect. Thank you, Professor Tuani. So do we have any other input into this question about the duality principle here in the world? It's a very curious question because it evokes a lot of strong, at least from my perception, strong feelings with regard to a lot of the natural phenomenon. For example, in physics, which is a thing I studied quite a bit, we always looked at light in a very curious way. We looked at it as either a particle or a wave, depending on the situation it was in. I'm sure that's quite a common motif in science and perhaps even art. Is there anyone else that would like to just join in this second question?
I would like to add on, if it's possible.
Sure, Professor Itzkovich, please.
On the quality engineer, Ernest Itzkovich. Thank you so much. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the participants. Very, very enlightening, very, very interesting. I would like actually to take the science and this duality into the practice. The practice, I'm coming from the industrial engineering, okay, and quality management and management systems up to global level. And actually, we would like to touch this duality as a part of an interaction between theory and practice, and implementation of the theoretical concept to the practical. For example, quality is everything what you feel and what you would like actually to attain or to achieve. You are ready to pay for it, for sure. But the interesting part for the perception, that if you have, for example, a product quality, somebody can like it and somebody cannot dislike it, even the product is perfect. But the interesting part of it is much more. If you try to see it on a global level, that everything is interconnected, and the connection actually is bring us together, and we have to consider in each other in order to keep this balance point, because the balance point is the only one point that will connect all of us in a common interest. What can be the common interest? The benefit of the society, the benefit of the world, that everybody that is willing to achieve, attain, reach something, or reach even balanced with nature, for example, okay, even this point should be attained or achieved through our connection and our relationships, our enthusiasm, the development of the human resources, the development of the technology, our networking, our interaction, and everything is actually, we are dependent on each other as a family, as friends, as people that work together, as the whole work together as countries and one humanity. We should understand and realize that the only one way is only duality. You have to give in order to get, and you have to make it willingly, not forcefully. And once we are agreed to do it, we are there. Let's make it together. Thank you very much, and best luck and success in connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. Beautifully put. I just want to add in there that he mentioned about the interaction between the different disciplines in a lot of universities these days. The ones that I know of, they are combining or trying to overlap science and design. So, in other words, aesthetics. We're looking at how beautiful things are in the world, and we're using principles of science to bring out these feelings of pleasure. So it's very curious. For example, in chemistry, we'll take photographs of color from reactions, and the colors will be outstandingly different than what we ever see normally in reality. And it provides us with this beautiful new way of looking at science through the lens of art. So anyway, just another thought to keep out there. So we may have just a few more minutes for this question. Is there any of our panelists that would like to continue to probe this question with us?
Hello.
Yes, please, Kalechi. Please, Professor Dr. Ahanu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I know I'm on the panelists for today, but this topic is very, very important for most people, especially for me. The duality principle, in my little understanding about it, both in mathematics, in geometry, in arts, in everything, even in music, we have it like black and white, plus and minus. And in electricity also, it appears everywhere. You need the negative and the positive nodes to generate electricity. And it's everywhere. We see it everywhere, in nature, in science, in art. And it's the concept that creates our reality, actually. You can never know happiness for sure if you've never been sad. And in quantum physics also, you need the wave particle theory, which Professor Ephraim can even go deeper on that. So I believe it's very essential for one to fully embrace the duality principle in everything. And when it comes to science and art, it's what makes it happen. And we will go deeper into that later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jasmine, please add. We'd love to hear you.
Yes, thank you very much. As a member of the IWRI Art and Culture Department, so we would like to add that especially art is one of the most common language, and it can be found at all levels of existence. So of course, it includes all that exists, and especially the differences and the opposition. So it is a vehicle that allows people from different culture and different periods to communicate with each other through non-verbal, like image, sound, but also stories, yes? So it's a way of transmitting the cultural heritage and translating it for the present generation. So it connects the past and the future. So therefore, art is really a major tool that serves the evolution of humanity and the progress of society. Because only through art, which permits the integration of all, it is possible to build these intercultural and intergenerational bridges. And science there is an art by itself, because it is a reformulation of the observation. So through questioning nature and all that surrounds us, we open a new field of perception. And this creates the new space where innovation is actually possible. And in that state, it is possible to create something new. This is how, for us, art and science are essential part in this process of formation of new structures and new models of society. So it is essential that it includes all the facets. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Very beautiful. Okay, so we will now go on. I think we've gotten a really good insight into those disciplines for this question of the duality. And now we'll go on to something more about harmony in the description. So the third question for our panelists: is it possible to achieve adequacy and harmony in the description of reality? Again, is it possible to achieve adequacy and harmony in the description of reality? And I'll put that in the chat. So feel free, anyone, if you have a chance to take a stab at this one. Anybody feel the spirit moving them, or shall I call on someone?
I am ready to go.
Ernest, yes, please.
Okay, sorry that I'm jumping in, but I really I feel that if you try to answer this question, we should see it on the global level, to see it like from the management point of view, like one global integrated management system. If we will try to see it from this holistic point of view or from this approach, we will actually understand that all the previous questions that we touched the duality and we touched the science and we touched the perception of reality, that everything is interconnected and everything actually depends on the relation between a person and the environment. Pretty much that's all. Because if you are talking about the senses, and each of us have the 5 senses, and we know how they are working and everything, the science and the modern science that should take place and bring us to the next level is only the science of connection. That's all. That's the only one field that we should explore, the relationships among us. And once we invest everything, our time and our effort, and by leadership, by example, and show and be involved and make this world better by our involvement and by our primary example, how to make it better, how to bring the whole humanity, society, community to a better world, that would be exactly the point that you start to feel that we are here for a purpose. We are not here by chance. Each of us has a job to do. But the job, it's not to go to work and make actually to pay off the bills and actually to make the necessities and have a good life. We are eligible for it. Most important is that we are here to give to the society, to give to the others, and serve as an example in order to bring this world to the next level, to the next development through science, through society, through communication, connection, and definitely our good intention toward each other. Thank you, Weinberg. Thank you so much. Success.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Very nicely put. So yeah, this idea of connectivity amongst living systems, among what we see on this earth is an interesting principle. We don't give it much sound time, or I guess attention. It's at least from the perspective of science. But if this question is going to be answered correctly, we have to say that there is something more to life than just very hardcore physics and chemistry. There's something in the, I guess, deeper reality. And so I guess this question really sort of skims over that, and we'd like to have more input on that. So if maybe Dr. Mandler, do you feel that you could give us your insights on this question?
I will try. I will do my best. I think that everything begins at the understanding of one's own limitations. When we approach the analysis of reality, and also when we analyze what we are looking into in science, we have to understand that we have very limited perception, and that perception also derives from certain experiences, certain way that we perceive objective reality, and we have to understand that it will, by definition, contrast another view of someone else who sees the same reality and sees the same, has different perception of the same phenomena that we are analyzing. And at the moment that we adopt this, I would say, modest view of one's capabilities to analyze the reality, then we understand that we all have a part of this creation of this larger harmony. And if we rise to another level of looking into the reality, for example, if you look at cells on a certain level, then you will see that there is this harmony and there is a competition, etc. And then if you rise to another level, you'll see that everything works perfectly in harmony. And also, for example, from my field in international relations, you'll see that between countries, sometimes you have high competition and wars and different conflicts. But then when you rise on a historical level and you really look at the processes that are happening on the global level for over, millennia, then you realize that it's all a part of a process. So understanding one's own limitation, understanding the limitation of how we approach and analyze science, it will really help us also work together in harmony with other researchers and also seeing the harmony when we are looking at it.
Beautiful, nicely put, harmony. It's a lot. We could spend a little bit of time on the idea of harmony, but we could, let's just get more input. So Professor Pines, would you like to input on this question?
Yes. I agree with Dr. Mandler on the limits in perception, the whole flow here. In a 1994 debate with colleague Roger Penrose, Stephen Hawking stated that he did not demand that a theory correspond to reality because he didn't know what reality is. So his only concern was that theory predicts the results of measurement. In short, as long as his mental map of the world correctly predicted any perception of it, he was satisfied. However, such myopic satisfaction can only be temporary. From Gödel's incompleteness theorem, but more precisely from the later advancement of algorithmic information theory, we know that any finite description of reality is incomplete and will sooner or later have to drift past its limits and go out of sync with perception. There really are no theories of everything, certainly none that a finite brain can hold. While we can reach a temporary level of adequacy and harmony, we will lose it if we rest on our laurels. Per the famous lyric of an old song by the American musical team of Simon and Garfunkel, you know the nearer your destination, the more you're slip sliding away. We have a lot of problems with all our limited systems as they break down, crashing into the larger and vastly more complex scales that the overriding force of globalization requires. This demands of us, as it always has been demanded of all other subsystems in nature, that we rise above individual differences without destroying them and properly ingratiate into integration with each other like the organs of a single body. Only through a process of integral education aimed at the development of integral communication and collective intelligence can we hope, per the American idiom, to continually keep up with the Joneses. That is, with the only Joneses worth keeping up with, an adequate description of reality for continuing homeostasis, harmony.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very well stated. Yeah, we're slip sliding away as we get closer. It's kind of an interesting principle to think about. Do we have any other panelists that care to join in on the conversation?
I can share some thoughts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. I mean, I would just like to build on the earlier conversation with just two interesting examples or experiences. First, going to Dr. Ernest, we live in a very interdependent world, interconnected world. If I just take a simple example of human being and the tree, I exhale carbon dioxide and tree inhales it. Tree exhales oxygen and I inhale it. So we live in a very interdependent, interconnected world. The limits exist in our mind, actually, how much we are able to see and perceive. Second thought which crossed my mind was a movie I saw long back, Vantage Point. There's an attempt to a murder in a square, public square. There are 5-6 people who see the murder attempt. Now, this movie director, story is that he goes to each one of them, describe what he saw of that situation when there's an attempt to murder. All the 5-6 people had a different narrative, different story. Same incident, different narrative and different story. So this only reinforces that, we perceive the world totally differently. We all 7 billion people lead a different life, have totally different perspectives, beliefs and views and opinions. And the external and internal world is shapes our beliefs. So the question going back to that harmony and completeness, yes, I totally agree with you with the thought you posted. Yes, it is possible to achieve adequacy and harmony, but it is subject to the individual's interpretation and their belief and experiences. Yeah, that's the only thing I would like to add. Thank you for the opportunity.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tawani. It's interesting. From the YouTube, we've got some comments here that are curious. We have here from Tatiana, science should not develop uncontrollably based only on the high curiosity in science. There should be a social responsibility element for science in the future of the world. How do scientific achievements, in other words, harm the environment? It's an interesting question. Does anybody want to answer or respond to Tatiana's question from the Russian YouTube?
I would like to answer it, if it's possible.
Please.
I'm not sure if my answer will be acceptable, but I will try from our point of view, at least from my experience. You know, I'm an expert in the ISO standards, and I believe that Sunil is a 10 times higher level professional on a global level. Okay, it's a like a Lancaster Award medalist. Okay, and a lot of achievements. But from the ISO or International Standardization Organization standards, there is a standard. It's called ISO 26000. It's called social responsibility. It's not only this one because we have like different interpretations. The ASA 8000, for example, in North America, okay, and British standards different. But one thing is common for everybody. When we are talking about science and we are talking about social responsibility, the first thing in science that should be top number one, we are not going to harm nobody. Whatever we are going to do, we are going to make it for the benefit of the humanity. Because the benefit of humanity is that we want to prosper and want to flourish and we want to develop and we want to reach and attain a level that everybody feels good and contributing and making any effort to help the others. You know, that is like a quote, like in North America, typically it's told, go the extra mile. What are you ready to do? One step further to go out from yourself and help others. So if we put together the previous questions, also regarding the duality and the global system, and everything is integrated and everything is interconnected, the most important thing that we remember that we have one society, we have one nature, we have actually something to share in common. It is the same air and the water and the natural resources that we would like actually to enjoy all of them. And that is our responsibility, personal. It can be municipal, on global level, or can be for every country. That is our commitment for the next generations to make sure that all the natural resources are actually they are maintained and preserved to a level that is that we can keep a healthy society for this generation and for future generations. And thus, as I mentioned, the social responsibility and science and everything, number one, take care of the others. Later on, take care of yourself. Thank you so much.
Yeah. May I come in?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you very much, Dr. Ernest. I mean, that's very kind and humble of you. I'm nowhere like that. Just one of you, like you, to try to implement principles of quality. I just had two thoughts around this question from Russia on the YouTube. Of course, we all totally agree that, you know, science should not be put to the wrong use. The two thoughts which go to my mind is Sir Isaac Newton's, you know, quote, every action has a reaction. If we just take simple example of plastics, plastic has brought phenomenal benefit to the society. If you just look at the positives, making things lighter, cheaper, available, accessible, it has done amazing wonders on many aspects, reducing the weight of the automobile to, you know, creating textiles, and poor people can wear that shirt for a long time compared to the cotton and so on and so forth. But the reaction part, the bad part of is the irresponsible behavior of our human beings on using plastics and the way we dispose it of and all that. I'm sure when it was created, we didn't, or the people didn't realize the negative aspects, the reaction of it, as Isaac Newton said that. So even though scientists and technicians and technologists develop new products like AI and digital and data analytics and all that with good intention in mind, sometimes, you know, it gets into the wrong hands, in the wrong minds, and it is put to the negative use. So sometimes the human behavior and human intent, which puts the science to the wrong usage. I think mostly the science is developed, the products are developed with good intentions in mind. And every reaction has every action has a reaction. Every tablet I take also has a slight side effect. So with that in mind, I will just share my perspective on this question for the person who put the question on the YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil, Professor Tawani. It was Tatiana Simonova from the Russian YouTube who had that beautiful question for us. There, just as a follow-up, Simon Dorlac on the English Facebook, he writes, just as a beautiful sort of follow-up, no scientific achievement will make a person happy. The vain scientific pursuits in search of improving our world miss the point, which is, however, the key to ultimate happiness, and for which all research should focus in particular on 3 areas: education, human relations, and this interconnectivity, economy, new economic order based on altruistic global systems, environmentalism, research based on improving our lifestyle in harmony with our ecosystems. All of the research sectors derive in priority from these first 3. Very well stated, Simon. Any feedback, comments on Simon's Facebook English post?
I would summarize it as sustainability. In one word, that actually brings everything together. That will be actually is the insurance for the next generations to come, that we are preparing for them a good world with good people, with good education, and everything of cooperation, of collaboration, and bringing all of us together toward one goal, balance with nature, and bring prosperity to the whole humanity. That is our goal. That is that we are here.
Nicely stated. Yeah, we have to shout that for everybody. Very well stated. I think then the last question that we can spend just a few minutes on before Professor Tavani's beautiful talk that will come up, is this one here that I put in the chat. This one summarizes, I think, our panel discussion quite well. Is the uncontrolled technologization of our life a threat to the artistic and scientific assimilation of reality? Is the uncontrolled technologization of our life a threat to the artistic and scientific assimilation of reality? Anybody would like to start us off on that discussion? Just a few minutes again. We don't have but about 3 minutes before Dr. Tavani's discussion. Maybe Professor Pines, you could summarize this for us.
Okay, I think that Professor Ajamali had put his hand up first, though.
Oh, sure. Just take over, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Anything that is uncontrolled will definitely be a threat. As we could see today, all the advances in technology, we have more nuclear weapons that can destroy this planet over and over again. We should have a kind of like Ernest mentioned, and like social responsibility is so control. Technology should be tampered with sustainability, and that's my point of view, that we need to control it, and it could be a threat. Actually, it's a threat to artistic and scientific assimilation of our reality at the moment. But what we're trying to do in integral world research, like we're doing today, is to gather minds, professors from all around the world, educators, and then we can look deeper and scrutinize ways we can control the technology and the development so that we don't end up eating up ourselves. Thank you.
Beautifully well stated. Yes, yeah, we will. I think as we've learned in this session, if we don't have this balance, like Dr. Itzkovic said so eloquently, we risk dooming ourselves to a loss of the connectivity if we don't see the balance in the world, in this duality, in this, like you said so well, Dr. Ahanu, working together to keep the technologization not to be so dominant. So thank you, everyone, for so beautifully stated points. I hope everyone on our social media sites has learned a little bit. I know I have. Thank you so much. A collective round of applause for the panelists. Thank you so much for your beautiful insights. We love it. Yeah, this is the purpose of this beautiful group, this integrated educational group So I think now we're on time, and I have the great honor and privilege, one of our ad hoc panelists who beautiful guided our discussions in this panel. Dr. Professor Tavani will be giving us a beautiful talk. It will be about 15 minutes. Just very quickly, for those of you that don't know, he's a fellow, an author, a board member, CEO, Quality Indeed Consulting Limited, and also affiliated with United Arab Emirates. So I think that's all. I guess the topic is securing the future in uncertain situations. So Professor Tavani, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. Let me start with the sharing the screen. Is it visible to all? Can you see the screen, please? Yeah, okay.
We can see,
thank you
yes.
very much for the opportunity. I'm really grateful and thankful to you and Dr. Ernest for the opportunity. The topic which I want to share my thoughts and perspective is securing the future of organization in uncertain times. You know, we are living in very uncertain times, and COVID has brought uncertainty to a huge scale, tremendous and over an extended period of time. So, you see, human mind is most of the time occupied with the future. What is in it for me? Whether it is the future of our children or of my investment or my growth, all that. So a lot of time we are occupied with the future, and which is uncertain. We are living in a very uncharted world. And this is going to remain like this. So I'd like to share a small experience. Lady Eliza was appointed as the Director General of British ISS MFI. Her main job was to prevent terrorist attacks from happening. During her tenure, there were 15 attempts and 12 were successfully prevented on time and saved a great deal of lives and property. So she says that it's a myth that you will ever have all the information you need. Whatever we do, when we make a decision, the knowledge is incomplete. She narrates her experience that we will have some signals, some kind of, terrorist attacks happening, but we will never know exact nature of it. What, when, where, who, and all that. So we are living in this world, and hopefully we'll continue to living in this, and maybe the uncertainty will keep increasing. Now, given the scenario, organizations are going through tremendous amount of churn, tremendous amount of impact. Now, what should leadership do in today's uncertain world? So going back to my 30 plus years of experience on change management, governance, performance improvement, and customer centricity, etc., I've thought of preparing some kind of strategies, approaches organizations can consider looking at. These are bucketed into the 4 verticals: focus on customer, understanding external business environment, people and culture, and operational excellence. I'll pick up few of it because of the limitation of the time. The entire document, the paper, is available on the website. Starting with the customer focus, every organization exists to serve its customer. They must know what their customer needs, what are their expectations, and how we can add value. Then, of course, is the external environment. The regulators change the rules, organization has to adapt. Just reflecting back on COVID, every other day regulations were coming in. How do the buildings need to be constructed? What kind of controls need to be there in offices, in schools, in offices? So all these protocols have to be integrated into the organization's policies and processes. Collaboration. I mean, today human being is very well positioned to collaborate globally thanks to the technology. Then the change. The culture is not easy to change. And if we have to sustain and succeed, we need to look at the culture. And then we need to bring in operational excellence in what all we do, whether it is digitization or whether it is identifying risks and mitigating them. Now, these are not in particular order or priority. They are all interconnected. For example, changes in the external environment will impact our operational excellence. The policies need to be relooked, and that can impact our customers and people. Now, I'll just pick up a few ones which I'm really passionate about. Is number one, going back to the customer. I mean, there's hardly any organization in the world which doesn't have a policy on customer service, customer value, focus, adding experience to the customer. But yet, customers experience inconvenience, frustration, delays, errors, and rework. For the last 1 year, I have been very lovingly reading the work of Professor Clayton Christensen, HBR professor. Very sadly, he passed away last year at a young age of 60s. He said, in our lives, a job arises. That job needs to be done with. Organizations need to understand what is that job given the circumstances. Suppose I move into a new town, suppose I move to Johannesburg, and I want to furnish my home quickly. Then I'm thinking, okay, let me go to IKEA. I have a job and I'm short of time. So let me pick up sofas and beds and lamps and lights and kitchen stuff. I can do that quickly in a few hours and get it assembled instead of going to 10 different shops. And then from tomorrow, I don't need that job. My job requirement changes. So organization needs to understand what is the job which arises in the lives of the customer and how it can help improve that. So after the COVID, it's a good time for organizations to go back to their customers, understand the changed needs, and redesign their product and service offering, and revisit the customer experience, whether it is digitization delivery or other ways of delivery. Coming to the external environment, connecting the dots. You see, this is the organization in the circle, and these are the external factors which are influencing the business. Supply chains are interrupted, it affects my business. Customer requirement changes, it affects my business. Public opinion influences my policies. And at the heart of the business are the processes and the procedure which deliver value and build consistency of output. In my 25 years of consulting experience across many industries, I have rarely seen organizations clearly identifying all the stakeholders and having strategies to continuously engage with them. It's not a simple world. We are living in a very complex world. So we need to step back and see how all this external environment is influencing my business, actually. Now, going forward, organizations need to put systems and practices in place to engage with all this. And now regulatory requirements are only increasing by the day, whether it is healthcare or aviation or manufacturing or retail or education. So organizations need to anticipate upfront, connect the dots, and see what are the challenges and emerging risks. Third very important thing is we have been used to forecasts, and presuming these forecasts will remain stable throughout the year. Today, information is changing very rapidly. We relied on forecasts. We cannot do that easily. I've seen government departments, they have a 5-year forecast. 1 year is over there, add one column, add some 5-10% of the value, and these are the new targets. That time is gone. Imagine to forecast for 2022 is to be built on 2021, you cannot. The reality of 2021 is very, very different. all numbers are up and down. So instead of forecasting, organizations can move towards scenario planning, which emerged out of the war, defense industry, and Thomas Peter Schwartz used this beautifully extensively at Shell. It's a good referral guide, and organizations can visualize the scenarios and may like to develop multiple business scenarios. Then is collaboration. Though it has been there, we have been collaborating on knowledge and technology and supply chains and products and services is not easy. Whenever the work is outsourced, many times the service quality falls apart. Dr. Ernest will know it very well. So my suggestion is to look at this framework, ISO 44001, because outsourcing is going to be there for a long time. Private sector has done it extremely well. To assemble a car, or let's say assemble a Boeing jet, you need few million components, and a lot of them come from different parts of the world. Or Toyota car, when it is assembled in Europe or US, half the car components come from 12, 15 different countries. So it's very, very important we align our objectives for a long-term strategic arrangement. Like Firestone and Ford Motor Company had 100 years of relationship. McDonald's and Coca-Cola have decades of relationship. So this standard helps us build and sustain those relationships for collaboration. Coming to the culture, I'm reminded of a conversation between Akai Morito. That time he was the deputy president of Sony Corporation. His conversation with the chairman. One day, chairman of the board called him and said, Akai, I really don't enjoy working with you. Many times you don't agree with my thoughts and you have a differing view. Whereas other leaders and generally listen and act as I say. You know what Akai Morita replied to him? He said, if two of us think alike, one of us is not needed. It is only the culture to differ from the boss. We help come out with a better decision making and minimize the risk of failure. And this is, I'm talking of 60s and 70s. Today, we need this culture more and more. We are in knowledge-based economy. We are in service economy. Those days are gone where Henry Ford said, when I need a pair of hands, why does a head come attached to it? So for the future, from this beautiful book, Yuval Harari's, I picked up some of the capabilities organizations can build on in securing the future, right from critical thinking to creative thinking to risk management and managing in uncertain times. A recent survey, very recent, just about a couple of weeks back, Deloitte did a global analysis of what are the leaders doing globally in this pandemic to sustain and succeed and secure the future. Dark green is they have done this work, organizations before 2020, and those who are planning to do. Just look at this, implement processes that enable organization to easily, quickly deploy workers in a different role. It's even pandemic hit here, there was a very large leading retailer, their entire entertainment business closed down, theaters and all that. Within 4 days or 3 days, they trained their staff and moved them towards digital delivery operating model. They have rotational programs to train people to reskill, diversify revenue streams. I have a customer, they make tags for the airline, baggage tags. Their tags go to 70 countries around the world. After the pandemic, airline business came down by 90%. His entire factory line went silent. Machines, people, everyone. Fixed cost itself became very difficult to maintain. So we need to think of diversifying our product stream. And then there are a lot of other things. diversify supply chain, flexible working operations, new technologies, and so on. Kind of almost coming to the end. You see, all these things are essentially built available in some of the concepts, principles, frameworks, and standards. If you look at EFQM model, European Foundation for Quality Management, these 7, 8 principles cover these very well, but not implemented effectively. There are various standards, 9,000 for quality, 31 for risk management, 50,000 for innovation, and so on. So we need to take these standards and inculcate and integrate systems working. That's what Dr. Deming, who brought Japan and Japan rise to the economic powerhouse, used to say that. We need to have systems working to sustain and succeed. And there is a self-excellence framework, Dr. Kano model, and the plan, do, check, act. In short, to conclude, preparedness is the key. I think Ray Dalio says it very well. Crises will come and go. We need to be prepared. Nobody knows when, but that's not a justification not to prepare. Collaborate. Bring in adaptability. One company wanted to put thermal scanners after this COVID. They started making RFP, floating a tender, and having a procurement committee, tender opening committee. Those days are gone. We need agility and speed and decision making. Balancing needs short-term, long-term. Building people capability. People should be okay to deal with ambiguity. People should be encouraged to take decision and okay to fail. Create a culture of continuous learning and organizational learning. Innovate. Technologies are making it happen. So with this, I thank the Integral World Research Institute for the opportunity, especially Dr. Ernest and others. If I can be of any help, and will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, beautiful presentation, Professor Tawani. So we have about 5 minutes, perfectly on time, for questions. So are there questions from the audience here, or I have a question from Simona on the English Facebook.
Okay.
Okay, so the question here from Simona, Sunil, is, does organizational culture affect customer relationships? If yes, how does it?
A beautiful question. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, it impacts the customer relationship. It's all about culture. You see, I will just put it like this in a very simple terms. Let's say I put 2 seeds of a plant in 2 different environments. One becomes a tree, blossoms, and gives us fruit and shade. Other tree dies. It's all the environment which makes an impact. If the culture is defensive, if we have a silo working, if there is a negativity, it promotes politics, it promotes power, it promotes backstabbing, it will never serve the customer. You remind me, when I first started my quality management learning in 1993, in my first interaction, my job was to create more awareness about customer focus. So I went to the head of materials management department, asked him, sir, who is your customer? I was expecting he will say internal customer. He said, boss is my customer. If we have that culture, that I always look to the boss and make him happy rather than look outside the organization, make external customer happy, company cannot do that. So it's all about culture. You will read any of the books and literature. it's all about culture, and customer service will definitely suffer. Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that, Simona, I hope that satisfies your question. We have now another question from a faithful question maker, Simone Dorlac. He asks us, what place does the brand management have in your concept? Doesn't it enclose the whole culture and vision of the business? Again, what place does the brand management have in your concept? Doesn't it enclose the whole culture and vision of the business?
Yes, absolutely, you're right. I mean, I have two thoughts on this. You see, brand is an output. I see it as a cause and effect. We may be spending millions of dollars on hoardings and campaigns to build a brand. My personal view is, if the product is good, its service is good, behavior is good, consistency is there, customer experience is good, brand will get built. Right? It's a cause and effect relationship. So in the strategies and approaches which I have listed, they are by no means all and complete. This I've done with the view of the uncertain future. But if these get implemented in the true spirit, if they're sustained, brand building will be a natural outcome or a product of that. So that's my thought on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perfect. We are perfectly on time, everyone. Let us give Professor Sunil Tavani a round of applause. I know it's virtual, but I want to thank you so very much. It was beautiful. We had some great questions, and it was a really lively event. And thank you so much for all you've done for us so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure is mine.
So,
totally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will continue now. We have the great pleasure and honor of introducing Dr. Leia Mandler. She has her PhD in political sciences from the University of Haifa, Israel, and she will be talking to us, again, 15 minutes on epistemic communities and professional networks during crisis. Professor Mandler, please.
Thank you so much. I will just share the screen for a second. Okay. So, as you said, my field of expertise is international relations and political science. I don't usually work on businesses or corporations, so everything is what the lecture that we just heard is extremely interesting to me, because we, me and my colleague Rosa Yanover, we have made this exercise in trying to apply research and understandings from international relations and political science into business and into professional networks. So for the last year, we had the opportunity to try and understand what is happening to professional networks, especially during the coronavirus crisis. So first of all, we need to understand that the purpose of the existence of professional networks, all of us, we have a lot of professional networks. Each of us is involved with colleagues and co-workers in various frameworks. And the main point of having a professional network is to use it at time of crisis, to use it for support and to draw resources and assistance from professional networks. We know from research that having a good relationship with their friends and with co-workers makes people feel much better at the time of work, and also influences our creativity and our productivity. We also know that when people are not feeling well at their workplace, it also influences their professional performance and also their well-being. These understandings depend on the field that we are dealing with. So there are certain disciplines of work that are more influenced by the professional networks and the relationships with coworkers. For example, we know that in IT and telecommunications, almost 72% of people say that the quality of their work depends on how well they're related to other co-workers. And then other industries, for example, travel and transport, they really think that there are other important factors that influence their happiness at the workplace, but co-workers are not so important like in IT industry. But in general, we can say that when people are unhappy at their workplace, when they are not satisfied with relationships with other people, then also they're not only less productive, they also more often leave their workplace. And we can say that it influences every aspect of their work. Unfortunately, even before we had this COVID-19 crisis, many people around the world felt that they are not having their relationships at work satisfied. And we know that almost 1 in every 5 adults feel that they don't have even a single friend at work. And this is very important if we want to understand how the crisis is actually exacerbating these problems. So how are professional networks structured? How do they work? First of all, we know that there are 2 types of ties in professional networks, like in any other networks. We have strong ties and we have weak ties. And most of us have strong ties with our friends, with colleagues that we feel comfortable with working, that we communicate and work with every day. But we also, at the same time, have weak ties with colleagues that are around the world, or with colleagues at our work that we do not communicate with every day, and we don't have with them such strong ties, but they are still part of our networks. And as you can see here on the drawing on the right side, the weak ties are actually what connect different networks one to the other. So if I have 5 friends at work, and one of them has a friend in another network, I potentially have connection with other networks outside my working place that I'm not using unless I understand this connection through my weak ties. And most of us actually do not use those weak ties. We do not know how to employ them. Sometimes we do use them when we are looking for a new job, or when we are looking for references, or we want an insight into how things are working in different workplaces. But in most cases, we do not use those weak ties, even though they make our own network stronger and bigger. So what is happening is that in our workplaces, we also use different communication patterns with those people that we feel comfortable and that we are used to working with. We speak directly. We know how to express our needs. We know to express how to express our decisions. But with those people that we have weak ties with, we usually put things more into context. They force us to explain ourselves more widely, and also to develop different patterns of communication in order to reach them. For example, all of you know that if you're trying to connect someone from a distant network, you will have to define your goals, and you will have to write them in an email in a much formal way than when you're calling your colleague at the workplace. So it also develops us when we understand how to use those weak ties. Unfortunately, in most cases, we do not do that. Another thing that is important to keep in mind is that the way that we are gaining knowledge, using knowledge, and providing knowledge to other people is basically a social process. What does that mean? Is that whenever we acquire knowledge, like for example, at this beautiful Congress, it comes from other people. It comes from people who are working on the same subjects, or sometimes on completely different subjects, but we receive those informations and knowledge from others. And the main reason for that is that we don't have the time and we don't have the resources to understand everything that is happening in the world, and especially in the field that we are specializing in. So we don't have the knowledge in all areas that we would like to have expertise in, and we need other people to gain that information from them. Also, the decision making that we are doing is not done in a vacuum. We are influenced by all the people that we work with, and we have to have we do have some kind of internal compass, but we also gain influence on that internal compass from people that we collaborate with. So this is how we know who can be trusted, what kind of information can be believed, and we know how to use that information and employ it for the work that we are doing. So basically, all the ideas of what we consider good work, what we think should be done or should not be done in professional networks, this is where we learn all those things. When we collaborate with other people at our workplace or in different professional frameworks that we are included in. So what has been happening with our professional networks during this COVID crisis? We can safely say that the crisis has been the crisis of the professional networks, because mostly the connections and the relationships with people, especially with our weak ties, is happening at the workplace in a very informal settings. For example, we know from a real research that both our professional and personal networks have been shrinking during the COVID crisis, but we also know that not everybody has been influenced on the same level. For example, the research has found that more men than women have been influenced by this shrinking of our professional support networks. And this is mostly due to the networking style, but also women, although they have been able to maintain their professional networks, they are reporting difficulty in expressing themselves, in passing the message through during the online conversation, and they feel ignored and overlooked by their co-workers even more than they have felt before the COVID crisis. So besides this feeling of inadequacy and inability to pass the message through the means of communications that we are using during the COVID crisis, the Zoom and the internet and the remote working, we also see that people are missing their co-workers. They miss them not only during informal meetings at the workplace, but also in the afternoons, sometimes at evening, sometimes in different frameworks which are not professional, but they are related to the professional networks. Another thing that has been very important to notice is that there is a huge difference between how the employees and the employers perceive the problem, how they see what is going on in the professional network. We can see here in the research that was recently done by the IBM Institute of Business Value, that the employers think that they're really helping the employees get the skills that they need to work in a new way through the computers and from home, but the employees feel that much less. Also, the employees feel that they are not getting the support, the physical, the emotional, and the health support from their workplace, while the employers think that they are providing it in the best possible way. We also see that the same is happening with the clear guidance and expectations from how the organization is going to work, from how the plans are going to happen. And this gap is frustrating people in their workplaces, and they are unable to share it during a coffee break or during lunch break or just chatting with their coworkers at their workplace. So we see that the traditional sense in which networking has been happening in the workplace before in professional networks is not available anymore. And many people are feeling overwhelmed by this disability to use those professional networks in the same way that they have used them before. So why is this important? Because we see that this is not going to change for the better. We are going to work more and more through the internet. And we see that most of the employees understand that they will have to work remotely from home or from other frameworks. And we see that also all the demands and also the predictions are that this type of working will jump by 2030 by 30%. So if most of the companies are planning to do all those things and change the way that we are networking with our coworkers, how are the employees going to adapt? So the thing is that, as we mentioned before, we have these weak ties that we are not using them, and those especially are getting mostly influenced by the pandemic on one hand. On the other hand, we see that everything is getting very blurred because people who are not able uh, to use those weak ties are really losing largely. We are connecting now with weak ties sometimes in different countries that before this opportunity that the COVID has brought into our lives, we couldn't use those networks as efficiently as we are using them now. So we have two types of interactions going on here. On one hand, we see that workers are feeling more isolated and that the virtual work is actually influencing all the informal and social aspects of work. But we also see that there is possibility to employ those weak ties in a different manner than we have done before, and we have to use this opportunity and understand how to do it. The main problem is that we are being left with only essential things in the professional networks. What does that mean? We are stripped of all the informal gatherings. We don't have the possibility to chat with co-workers and friends at work. And we have to concentrate on the main things, on the essence. The question is, what is this essence? How can people connect around the essence in the workplace when the fact that the project itself is usually not enough to be the essence that the network can be created around it. So what we thought is that there is a term of epistemic communities that exists in the research of political science and international relations for already a long time. It was coined by Peter Haas in 1992, and he actually wanted to discover how are new ideas and new knowledge introduced into political work, and how are decision makers gaining this new knowledge. Where does this new knowledge come from? So he formulated the epistemic communities as a framework of professionals who work with other professionals in different countries, and they are capable of bringing new information and new ideas into the professional networks and through them to the decision makers. So the major power of the epistemic community is actually their expertise, their ability to bring information which is impartial. It is intended to be used by decision makers without any political considerations, without any bureaucratic restrictions. And basically those communities are responsible for gaining and bringing knowledge of value to decision makers. So epistemic communities can be defined by as entities, social psychological entities that create and justify knowledge, and they are capable of transferring that knowledge into the organizations, into the procedures, into the through the professional networks, into the level that needs to make the decisions. So there are four unifying characteristics that set apart the epistemic community from any other of professional networks. First of all is that epistemic communities have a shared set of normative and principled beliefs. And these beliefs are what the community is based on. These are actually the beliefs that the causal understandings are derived from, and they share practices in order to contribute to a deeper understanding of the set of the problems that they are dealing with. So from that basis, the epistemic community is capable of advising regarding a possible policy action or regarding the desired outcome. They also have a shared notion of validity and intersubjective understanding of what is true, what is untrue, and how do we weight data, and how do we decide that something is valid or not valid. Another important feature of epistemic community is a common policy enterprise, which means that they have to have a common goal, so some kind of set of problems that this community is trying to solve. And the most important thing is that the end goal of this community is something for the betterment of the society and not something for the betterment of the community itself. So this is the purpose why the community is created in the first place. So how do we import the idea of epistemic communities into professional networks? How do we enrich professional networks by the features that I have just described? First of all, we need to establish new type of networks. We need to establish topic-related networks which combine weak and strong ties together so we can employ the best of both. And we also need mixed level approach, which means that we have executive and employees in the same group, in the same epistemic community, working together. So basically, we are trying to suggest the establishment of multidisciplinary groups of experts on any given topic that the company or the country is trying to deal with. And they have to be based on two main and interconnected pillars. One of them is the provision, the gaining and the provision of information. And the other pillar is the pillar of connection. What does that mean? Is that we can combine professionals from different projects, different organizations, different firms, different countries, different cultures. And the more different they are, the better the community will be, given that it is also working according to all the principles that we have just talked about. So we are basically providing a solution that combines shared beliefs with certain conformity pressures of what needs to be done in order to solve a particular problem. So,
Professor Mandler, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. If you can maybe wrap up, that would be wonderful. Sorry.
I'll just run quickly. So the two pillars, as we said, one is epistemic, the other one is the one is the informational pillar, the other one is the connection pillar. The information pillar actually is based on the ability of such communities to dispute fake news, to provide valid and trustworthy information, which the professionals can use as their intellectual resource, and also provide this information all the time, keep it updated, keep it checked, and ready to use. And the connection pillar is based on the ability of these professional networks to provide the needs of collaboration, mentorship, and sponsorship that the people need when they are collaborating, so that we can provide the workers with the trust and mutual understanding that they are creating through shared experiences. So I'll just run quickly. We have the vertical frameworks and horizontal frameworks that enable us to do those things. We suggest working in working groups, which are topic groups of professionals that collaborate around a certain topic. And we also provide horizontal frameworks which provide peer support, because only peers can really understand what you are going through at your workplace, in your professional community. And they are able to give you the practical insights to see your successes and failures, and also provide you the hope and empathy that you need when you're collaborating with other people. And here is a very optimistic view of this approach. We see that the companies are actually doing this already. We have an enormous increase in partnerships, in ecosystems in business, in networks which are not from one industry, but from many industries. And the only thing that this requires is to reframe everything, adapt it in the correct way, and provide the professionals with the idea of performance that is based on trust and confidence between employees. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Mandler. Very well stated. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Nevertheless, we're happy that you were giving us that beautiful understanding of networks, business ecosystems, beautiful, especially in today's society, post-pandemic society. So we'll have to field questions for you. You'll field questions in the end. The co-host, Paz, will be able to ask you. We have a couple of questions that we'll be able to give you, and I apologize about that. We have to maintain very strict, because it's a very full schedule. So anyway, just want to let you know that we're approaching break, and there will be a second part in which Paz will be taking over. We are going to be regaled by another couple of speakers. We have Herculean effort by Professor Meir Shimon, who will be talking to us about the Anthropic Principle. Are you a Boltzmann brain? That's going to be very fascinating. Professor Yash Chuk, who will be talking to us about psycho-emotional well-being. And then finally, as we know, Professor Elliot Pines, who's been very active, he's going to be talking to us very interestingly about stone, paper, scissors, a depth of child's play. So what we'll do is we will take a break now. It will be for 8 minutes, roughly. So we would like for you to be back here at about 15:44 Israel time. Okay? So we'll be back in about 8 minutes. So thank you so much and see you in about 8 minutes.
The butterfly starts out as a caterpillar. And inside this caterpillar, there are, let's say, 7 billion cells. And every cell, like a miniature human, has a job in that caterpillar. Some cells are doing digestion. Some cells are the musculature moving the caterpillar around. Some are the nervous system. Some are the circulation system. Every cell has a job. All the cells are working full out, and the economy is just bustling and bustling along, and the caterpillar is growing every day and growing and growing and growing. And then one day, the caterpillar stops eating and stops moving. And all of a sudden, the cells inside this caterpillar, which were highly organized into the efficient economic machinery to keep this thing running, the cells start looking around, and sort of like the digestive cells would say, my goodness, there's no work today, there's no food coming in, so there's nothing for me to process. The muscle cells are saying, we're not moving anymore, and we have so many muscle cells, and there's no work for these muscle cells. And at some point, the economy starts to lag so much that cells everywhere start to see that it's not working. The system is falling apart.
The United States is facing a real public health threat from greenhouse gas emissions.
Somehow the rich will eventually get so full that they'll explode. And the candy will rain down on the rest of us.
However, experts say unofficial numbers for the nation's jobless are much higher, as unemployment in minority communities lingers in the double digits to as much as 17% by some predictions.
The American dream fell down, never to be heard from again.
The United Congress is incapable of making legislation on healthcare, banking, trade, or taxes, because if they do it, they will lose their political funding, and they won't do it.
And then all of a sudden, from among the ranks of these cells, a new community of cells starts to manifest. These cells are genetically identical to all the other cells, but these cells see the world in a different way. These cells are called imaginal cells. And these imaginal cells see a different future. And from all the chaos that's around them, the imaginal cells actually start to bring a new idea into the population, how they can escape from the shell and confinement of that caterpillar and create something more sustainable, something more beautiful. And from the information of these imaginal cells, the cells start to gather around and create a new civilization. And the new civilization builds a brand new thing called the butterfly. The butterfly is an evolutionary advance over the caterpillar. And flying out of the broken skin of the dying caterpillar comes a new civilization. This is not the end. This is the beginning of something much greater than humans have ever experienced on this planet before. The creation of a new organism, humanity. Every human is a cell in the body of this wonderful, evolving organism. What we're facing today is a world that is in late-stage caterpillar. So it becomes very important for us to let go of the old and start to gravitate to the new, because we are leaving behind a world that is no longer sustainable and moving into a world in which we can thrive.
So much of the action in psychology has been a running debate over which view is right. And this concerns morality, both moral judgments of right and wrong, but also moral feelings, including compassion. Many people would argue that in that regard, the baby starts off with nothing. The idea is children start off immoral, monsters, or if not monsters, at least they know not for good and evil. This is not the view which I think is supported by the data. I think there's now more and more data in support of a different view of compassion. One way to make a baby cry is to expose it to the cries of other babies. There's sort of a contagiousness to the crying. It's not just crying. We also know that if a baby sees another human in silent pain, it will distress the baby. It seems part of our very nature to suffer at the suffering of others. We know that young babies, as they become capable of moving voluntarily, will share. They will share food, for instance, with their siblings and with kids that they're around. They will soothe. If they see somebody else in pain, even the youngest of toddlers will try to reach out and pat the person, maybe hand over a toy. There's some lovely studies finding that slightly older children are able to help others. When they see somebody who's unable to fulfill a goal, they'll seek out to come to their aid. So one elegant demonstration of this comes from a recent set of experiments where they take a toddler, put him or her in a situation where an adult is in some sort of mild distress, and see if the toddler will voluntarily help, even without any prompting. And they find that toddlers typically do. There seems to be some sort of impulse in us that's altruistic, that's kind, that's compassionate.
The butterfly starts out as a caterpillar. And inside this caterpillar, there are, let's say, 7 billion cells. And every cell, like a miniature human, has a job in that caterpillar. Some cells are doing digestion, some cells are the musculature moving the caterpillar around, some are the nervous system, some are the circulation system. Every cell has a job. All the cells are working full out, and the economy is just bustling and bustling along, and the caterpillar is growing every day and growing and growing and growing. And then one day, the caterpillar stops eating and stops moving. And all of a sudden, the cells inside this caterpillar, which were highly organized into the efficient economic machinery to keep this thing running, the cells start looking around, and sort of like the digestive cells would say, my goodness, there's no work today, there's no food coming in, so there's nothing for me to process. The muscle cells are saying, we're not moving anymore, and we have so many muscle cells, and there's no work for these muscle cells. And at some point, the economy starts to lag so much that cells everywhere start to see that it's not working. The system is falling apart.
The United States is facing a real public health threat from greenhouse gas emissions.
Like somehow the rich will eventually get so full that they'll explode. And the candy will rain down on the rest of it.
However, experts say unofficial numbers for the nation's jobless are much higher, as unemployment in minority communities lingers in the double digits to as much as 17%.
Growing up in the northeast of the United States was my dream. I wanted to be an astrophysicist. Everyone who was a nerd, who was into science, wanted to be an astrophysicist because it was the one thing we could never understand. And so we always aspire for that which we don't understand. So astrophysics from Tel Aviv University. Professor Shimon's master's thesis was on 2+1 dimensional gravity. And his PhD dissertation was about physical processes in galaxy clusters. I think we heard Professor Pines talk about Professor Stephen Hawking. And I remember in high school, one of the books that Professor Hawking wrote about gravity was the only way I was able to understand gravity. It was beautiful. So I look forward to Professor Simone's discussion to us. So Professor Simone, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucian, for the introduction. I also wanted to thank everybody for coming, and especially to Ephraim that invited me to give this talk, from which another talk emerged, the idea to talk about the Boltzmann brain. Yes, so let me just see if I can share the slides with you. Just a second. So do you see it? Okay, let me just in the view mode. Okay. Okay, so the anthropic principle has to do with the word anthropos, a man, person, but actually doesn't have necessarily to do with that. I mean, this is the way that it was first presented, but we're talking about any carbon-based life form, right? So, so let me start with a quote by Albert Einstein. He said, "What really interests me is whether God had any choice in the creation of the world." Right. So, of course, we physicists try to see how things work, but a deeper question is, could they work differently? I mean, it's not. I mean, for us at least, it's not enough to see how things work. We would like to see the foundations of the physics. How, I mean, what freedom did God, creator, whatever you want to call it, had in creating our world? So what are laws of physics? Laws of physics are just equations, constraints on physical quantities, how they behave, how they interact with each other. This is a famous equation that everybody knows. E equals mc squared. E is the energy, m is a mass, and c is the speed of light. So c is a constant of nature that is used just in conversion of units from mass to energy. So energy and mass have different units, and c is just a conversion factor that has units of speed of light, and it's a mediator between mass and energy. Another example is Maxwell equations. This is a set of 4 equations that govern the dynamics of the electromagnetic field. So here on the left-hand side, you see E and B. Here E is electric field and B is the magnetic field. And the funny symbols here on the left-hand side, these inverted triangles just describe some spatial variations of these fields. And here on the right-hand side, you see here the letters T here and here. This just a symbol for the variation of these fields with respect to time. Again, to convert from length units, from spatial units to time units, you have to introduce this c, the speed of light. So again, we see c as a conversion factor between different units. We measure mass with a scale, with balance. We measure time with a clock. We measure length with a yardstick. And you have to convert between these different quantities, inherently different quantities that you measure with different measuring devices. Unlike in mathematics, where everything is pure numbers. In physics, we do have to, I mean, physics is a science of measurement, right? So Here is another example. This is a Schrodinger equation. This is the most famous equation in quantum mechanics. I mean, just ignore the details. The point here is that the left-hand side tells you something about energy. The right-hand side tells you something about frequency. And the conversion factor between frequency and energy is h bar. This is a funny symbol. H is just a constant of nature. And here, this is my last example of physical laws. These are Einstein equations. Einstein equations govern the interaction between, let's say, space and matter, how matter curves space and vice versa. So the left-hand side here has to do with the geometry of space and time, and the right-hand side here, this T mu nu, is the energy density and pressure, things that have to do with matter. How do you go from energy density, from energy, to curvature, to geometry, by just introducing this conversion factor? G here is the strength of gravity, and C again is the speed of light. So we are talking about nature's constants. Here we see a table of nature's constants: C, G, H, the electric field, the electron mass, and the list goes on and on and on. The idea is that these conversion factors, these constants of nature, are universal constants, and you can use them here or everywhere else in the universe in order to convert between units that you need for your physical laws, for your equations. So is there a fine-tuning of nature constants? Are they somehow orchestrated to be consistent with the existence of life, of carbon-based life? So the existence of sustainable carbon-based life is very sensitive to the empirical values of these universal physical constants. This is something that has been known for, I think, at least 50, 60 years. These constants are on a knife edge in the sense that even a slight deviation of one of them would result in no life. Now, I should say that recent studies show that, yes, each one of them, life is sensitive to each one of them, of a set of parameters, not all these constants of nature, but subset of them. But if you vary two of them, so simultaneously, you can still have a large deviation, large departure from their actual values and still have life. But if you do that only for one of them, then you can say that they are on a knife edge in a certain sense that I will define later. Again, these are only the recent studies from the last year, so I cannot say that this is acceptable, an acceptable result on the community, but many of us will agree that if you vary at least one of them from their measured empirical values, then you will end up with no life at all. The universe seems to be conducive to the existence of life as we know it, and this led people to formulate the Anthropic Principle, and there are two versions. Actually, there are about 30 versions, but the two main versions are the weak and strong version. So the weak version tells us that nature's constant must be compatible with the existence of carbon-based life, since the existence of life is a fact, right? So this is a fact, you cannot ignore it. This is a point in your data set. It's just a consistency check. You would like to see that our existence or animal existence or whatever, any form of life is consistent with a constant of nature. The strong version tells us that nature's constant must be compatible with the existence of carbon-based life, since the existence of life is its ultimate purpose. So here we are talking about purpose, about intention, about a plan, and this is something that that many of us find hard to accept, because you need some external agent that has some purpose in creating this world, and this is something that is hard to accept for many of the physicists, at least. So here is the first example that I would like to give of this Arthropic principle. So we take it for granted that we have one time dimension and three spatial dimensions. We live in a space-time. But actually, if you just look at your possibilities, so here we see this axis, you can see the number of time dimensions, and here in the horizontal axis, you see the number of space dimensions, and we are here in this square, 3 space dimensions and 1 time dimension. If you try to explore the other possibilities, you hit either kind of instabilities like the tachyonic instability or this portion of this diagram, or the universe will be unpredictable. Just give an example. If we had only 1 additional spatial dimension, if we had lived in 4 space dimensions and 1 time dimension, the trajectory of planetary system will be unstable. So you won't have any stable climate. Life would not exist. If you lower the number of spatial dimensions or increase the number of time dimensions, then the universe is too simple to maintain life. So we find ourselves stuck in this square, and this might be a coincidence or might not be a coincidence. Another example is the strength of gravity. You remember the constant G that I mentioned earlier in the context of Einstein equations. If the strength of gravity G is higher than is actually measured, then Earth will be closer to Sun because the Sun will attract Earth much stronger, and this will result in an uninhabitable planet. The temperature on Earth will be too high for life to exist. On the other hand, if G is lower, then the matter that clustered these small perturbations of matter density at the very early universe that ultimately clustered into galaxies and eventually to stars like our sun and subsequently to planets, wouldn't take place or would be much slower, and then life of our kind will not be able to form. So you see that G, the tolerance in variation of G cannot be too large. Otherwise, it will be inconsistent with the existence of our life. Another example is the sun. So I think that I'm running out of time. Let me just do that very quickly. For the star to exist, there is a balance between gravity that tries to collapse all the matter into a single point, because gravity is attractive and attraction force, but in order to keep it stable, you need a pressure, an outgoing pressure, in order to counteract the gravitational interaction, and this is provided by nuclear fusion here at the center, at the core of the sun. So this is a competition between gravitational interaction and nuclear interaction, and here is an example of how things work. For 2 protons to interact with each other in a nuclear interaction, they have to get over their electromagnetic repulsion because they have the same charge, right? Both of them are positively charged. So they have to cross what is called the Coulomb barrier. So this means that if I increase the strength of electromagnetic interaction, they will have to cross a larger barrier. They won't be able to do that, obviously, and there will be no nuclear interaction in this regime. And this means that there is no counteracting pressure to balance gravity. You will have no stars, no sun, and obviously no life on Earth. If you lower the potential barrier by just weakening the electromagnetic interaction, then this interaction, strong nuclear interaction will be too fast. The star, the sun, our sun, will consume all its nuclear fuel very, very quickly, and it will end its life very, very fast, and life won't have a chance to form because astrobiologists say that we need at least 1 billion years for life to form on Earth. And there are a few other examples. I'll skip them. I'll just say that there is the look elsewhere effect. When you want to say that you discovered something, it's not enough to say that, okay, I found some remarkable results, something that cannot be explained by some coincidence. You really have to look elsewhere and see what are the other possibilities in order to compare the significance of your discovery to other possibilities. For example, there are many other constants of nature to which the existence of life is virtually insensitive. For example, the quark masses and the Higgs masses. So it's not enough to say that, yes, it's very sensitive to G, to the strength of gravity and electromagnetic interaction. You can compare your requirements to other constants of nature and see that life is insensitive to these other constants of nature. So this means that things are not, not unequivocal. You cannot say that, yes, we have a proof that life cannot exist without changing all the parameters. There are parameters to which life is insensitive. Now, how improbable our universe is. In order to do that, you really have to compare to other universes, but the problem is that we don't have other universes. There are models of the very early universe, like a cosmic inflation and superstring theory, that tells us that there are other universes, actually infinitely many universes, with which we cannot interact. We don't know their properties. We cannot really do a meaningful statistical comparison with them. So these are just artistic impressions of these kind of other universes. Another question that comes here is the Anthropic Principle predictive at all? For a scientific paradigm to be accepted, you want your theory to be predictive. So Fred Hall, the British physicist, made some prediction that has eventually been actually measured by experiment and proved to be correct. So this is perhaps the most known prediction made by a physicist based on the Anthropic Principle. I don't have time to cover it. This is Steven Weinberg, the American physicist that made actually an anthropic prediction for the upper bound of the dark energy, the species of the energy density that causes the universe to expand rapidly, actually accelerate its expansion rate. So he set an upper bound that has been consistent with measurements that have been subsequently made using supernovae. And this is Yakov Zeldovich, the Soviet physicist that used also anthropic considerations in cosmology. Let me just quickly summarize. Life, as we know it, is very sensitive to the empirical values of certain constants of nature. A few percent lower or higher values, we are talking about few percent, of these parameters will result in an uninhabitable universe. Is it a coincidence? Could it be different? This is a question that Einstein asked. Is it really a knife edge precision? Maybe 2 or 3% is not knife edge, right? How do you know? You don't have other universes to compare with. Is it scientific? Does it make any predictions, right? Is there a purpose? This is a weak versus the strong versions of the Anthropic Principle. I mentioned also the look elsewhere effect. We only have a single universe. We have nothing to compare with. Life seems to be insensitive to the precise values of certain other constants of nature, like the quark masses, the neutrino mass, the Higgs mass that I mentioned. So I'll end here and I'm ready to take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shimon. It was a great presentation. I got really inspired by it. I have my own question, but I'll open it up first to our audience. Yes, I think Professor Ephraim Eliav, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for really very interesting presentation. You have skipped the prediction of Fred Hoyle. I have never heard about this kind of prediction. Could you please say a few words about this?
Sure. So Fred Hoyle is actually famous for another thing that he made. He is the father of the steady state universe, the rival model of the Big Bang. Eventually, we now think that the universe is expanding from the Big Bang. But anyway, he made a prediction. He said that for life to exist, the carbon atom needs some resonance level that was not known at his time. I think it was in the 50s something, 53 or something. And a few years later, it was actually confirmed by experiment. I've I've read something that was written by an historian of science that said that actually Fred Hoyle, there is no evidence that Fred Hoyle used anthropic consideration, and only in retrospective he ascribed that to anthropic consideration. So maybe it wasn't really a prediction, I don't know. But I think that most of the people would agree that this is a prediction that Fred Hoyle made. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Thank you, professors. We have no questions right now from social media. So if anyone on Zoom would like to ask, there's 1 minute. Okay, so we will let you continue with the next presentation. I will keep my question for the end, so you might have more time to answer it. I'm not sure 1 minute will be enough. So please, Professor Shimon, can you continue to the Boltzmann Brain? Hey, Professor Shimon, if you are intending to speak to us, you are currently muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you. Okay, okay. So the title of this talk is, are you a BB? Are you a Boltzmann brain? The idea actually is about 100 and something years old, but not in this particular form. Let me just start with a very brief, not history, the opposite of history of our universe. Before we continue, because BB will be important here. So in 4 billion years from now, the Milky Way will merge with our neighbor galaxy, Andromeda, to form a new galaxy. In 5 billion years from now, the sun becomes a red giant and life on Earth will end. Just Earth will virtually be engulfed with fire at that time. In 8 billion years from now, the sun will end its life as a white dwarf, will be as small as Earth, but in a different form of matter, white dwarf. In 100 billion years from now, all other galaxies go outside of our observable universe because of the accelerated expansion of the universe due to dark energy cosmological constant, if you heard about it. So observers here on Earth or in our galaxy won't be able to tell that there are any other galaxies in the universe. They won't be even able to think about the Big Bang because they will have no evidence for the existence of other things outside of our galaxy. In 1 trillion years from now, no stars are left other than white dwarfs, neutron stars, and black holes, which we call compact astrophysical objects. In 1 quadrillion years, solar systems are stripped from their stars. In 10 to the 30 years, 1 and followed by 30 zeros. Or it doesn't have to be 1, it can be 3 followed by 30 zeros, but who cares about this factor of 3? All stars fall into supermassive black holes at the galaxy center, our galaxy center. In 10 to the 40 years, all atomic nuclei decayed already. In 10 to the power of 106 years, 1 followed by 106 zeros, all black holes have evaporated via Hawking radiation. They will just give away all the energy that they accumulated over the years, over the history of the universe, and the dark era of the cosmos will start. Let me just skip this one. In 10 to the 40 years, so it's 10 to the 10 to the 40 years, all remains collapse into black holes, which then evaporates, and this is called the heat death, the Boltzmann heat death. So the entire universe will be in a thermal equilibrium, meaning that all matter in the universe will have exactly the same temperature. There will be no variation of temperature in the universe. For example, the face of the sun is a temperature of 6,000 degrees. The temperature on Earth is about 20 centigrades, right? So there is a huge gradient of temperature. This is why we can, suck energy from the sun and live. And the center of the sun, the temperature is about 20 million centigrade. So we are talking about huge gradients, but all this will not be when the universe get the heat death. So will be no chance for life at all. In 10 to the 10 to the 50 years, to the power of 10 to the power of 50 years, a Boltzmann brain, a sentient self-aware entity will pop up into existence from nothing due to some quantum fluctuation or statistical fluctuation of thermodynamical type. In 10 to the 10 to the 56 years, a new Big Bang will happen, will take place. And this will start a new cycle in the infinite history of the universe. So if you think about this, what happens when we combine infinities with statistics? Think about a universe which has been existed for infinite time and will exist for infinite time. All these huge, gigantic, insane numbers are nothing compared to infinity, although they are something that we cannot even comprehend. And Boltzmann, the hero of this story, actually speculated that the Big Bang of our universe is something like that. He was talking about a universe which is infinitely old, and just by spontaneous fluctuation of the matter in the universe, just by chance, and if you wait sufficiently long time, this will happen sooner or later. And if you have infinite time, this will surely happen. All the matter in a certain volume will just cluster into a single point, and the Big Bang will start. But our story, our interest here is actually BB, the Boltzmann brain. So let me go. So this is how it looks like. This is an artist's impression, and obviously this is wrong. Why is this wrong? Because the Boltzmann brain is supposed to be in a heat death. There are no stars, nothing, just pop up in the void. So this is an artist's impression. So obviously it's not necessarily correct. And I should say that the Anthropic Principle that I mentioned in the previous talk and cosmology are actually in a clash, because the Anthropic Principle say something about life, about men, about the place of man in the universe or any other form of life. And the Copernican Principle, which is has been the guiding principle in cosmology at least for a few hundred years, especially in modern cosmology, which is less than 100 years old, which tells us that we inhabit no special place in the universe, and especially man doesn't play any special role in the universe. This is something that they are in kind of a clash, and the whole idea of Boltzmann brain has to do something with the Anthropic Principle, at least in spirit. So Ludwig Boltzmann was an Austrian physicist. He actually died in 1905 or 1906, before we had the Big Bang universe, Big Bang theory. And he is considered by many as the father or founder of thermodynamics, the part in physics, subject in physics that has to do with system in a given temperature, a constant temperature, which is thermodynamic equilibrium. So what is the second law of thermodynamics that was so interesting, that really gripped the mind of Ludwig Boltzmann? Second law of thermodynamics tells us the following. Time in the universe, at least on macroscopic scales, has an arrow, has a direction. We do remember the past, we don't remember the future. Why? We say that the future didn't happen. Another way to say that is just that we don't remember it, right? So the idea is the following. If you have a glass, the glass always breaks. You never see the pieces collect themselves together into a glass, right? So this is just one example of the arrow of time issue. So the second law tells us that the entropy, which is a measure of the disorder in a physical system, never increases. It always it never decreases. Excuse me. It always increases, or at least stay constant over time, of course, at least on average. And this was a great contribution of Boltzmann, this second bullet, that fluctuations into lower entropy states or into more orderly states, in other words, can and do spontaneously occur if you provide sufficient time. The second law of thermodynamics is intimately related to the arrow of time, as I just mentioned. Once the entropy reaches its maximum value, the system has reached a Boltzmann heat death, the thing that I mentioned earlier. However, it does not stay in this state forever because of these fluctuations. These are occasion fluctuations, spontaneous fluctuations. They happen from time to time. This time can be 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 50 something years, but in an infinite universe, you have sufficient time for this to happen. It will happen sooner or later. There are cosmological consequences to the second law of thermodynamics. We do know for a fact that our universe started as a very low entropy state. It was very ordered. And after its expansion, you know, galaxies has formed, and you have all these processes that of course, increase the disorder in the universe. But it started as a very low entropy state, as if it was contrived or created this way by some external agent. This is a problem, and we try to, of course, to tackle this problem by all means. So the idea of Bosman was that the universe could have started off as an extremely rare low entropy fluctuation from an infinitely old and big universe that is in a heat death, unusual. But at some point, all the matter in a certain volume just clustered into a single point, and this started the Big Bang that we observe, that we see in our patch of the universe. 30 years later, Eddington suggested why do that for an entire universe? It's sufficient to do that for a galaxy. A galaxy is a much smaller than the entire universe. It contains a much smaller number of particles. This fluctuation will be much more frequent than for the entire universe to form spontaneously. And later on, people were talking about why not having one sentient human being that can observe the entire universe and tell that these are the people that I see, this is the universe that I see. And of course, one person is much easier to form this way. Now, this sounds very odd, but if you think about that as a physicist, a man, a woman, doesn't matter, a galaxy, the entire universe, everything is just matter, just particles. So we are talking about accidental meeting of different particles at one point in time to form the body that I have. This is very unlikely in our universe, but again, if you have infinite time, this will happen. My body, your body, whatever. And then people were talking about, and this is an idea from 2004, about the Boltzmann brain, that even a single disembodied brain that observes the entire universe can form. This is an idea by Albrecht and Sorbo from 2004. And this brain may have all the false memories, thoughts, feelings, everything is just electric currents running in our brain that you might have, right? All the things that, you experience only the present. And you have memories about the past, but these are memories that run in your brain at the present. You have hopes and dreams for the future, but you don't live the future. You just live in the present. So you need a Boltzmann brain to form spontaneously for a blip of an eye. And you have everything that you see, everything that you thought, that you remember from the past is something that should happen in this brain for a split of a second. Actually, this BB might be you listening to this talk. So there is question, are we ordinary observers or are we Boltzmann brains? In a 14 billion years old universe, ordinary observers greatly outnumber BBs. But in an infinitely large and old universe, nothing is impossible and everything is possible. Everything will happen eventually. Statistically, in such an infinitely old universe, the likelihood of you being a BB is much larger than for you to have evolved through a natural biological selection process. Since I'm running out of time, I'll just try to read, and this will be much faster. Now, there are many objections to BB. One of them is that I'm not a BB. I see that I'm not. The question, of course, the counter argument is, how do you see that you are not? You see that in your brain. You feel that in your brain. You sense that in your brain. I feel my legs. I feel my hands. I feel that in my brain. I might be a single brain. Of course, there is another one, which is called cognitive instability of BBs. What does it mean? That you are unlikely to be a BB if the universe is 14 billion years old. You are likely to be a BB if the universe is very insanely old, as we saw at the beginning. But we do observe that the universe is only 14 billion years old. So this means that you didn't pass this sanity check, because you owe your existence for a very old universe, but yet you observe a relatively young universe. 14 billion years, for that matter, is actually young. But this doesn't mean that this Boltzmann brain has to be, to pass this sanity check. So maybe we are still BBs, but we didn't pass this cognitive instability test. Is BB at all useful? So people are talking about that. Let me just say that many physicists observe BB as a diagnostic tool. It's kind of censorship, that if your model of the universe contains or will allow the existence of BBs, then you rule out your model, because this will be cognitively unstable. Again, many physicists are not 100% sure that this should be this censorship procedure is actually warranted by our understanding of the basics of physics. Now, actually, BBs are inevitable. For example, even in our universe, the 14 billion years universe that we see, that we observe around us, we know that it accelerates its expansion rate. So if this acceleration will continue, then our universe will continue forever. It will be infinitely old, many, many years ahead. And then a real Boltzmann brain will pop up into existence, a BB that really will really pass this sanity check. It will observe an infinitely old universe and will be also infinitely old. Let me just skip this one and summarize. The idea that you are a BB is indeed very old. However, it might be an inescapable consequence of the fundamental laws of physics, meaning our physics of gravitation, thermodynamics, and quantum mechanics, combined with the currently leading theories of the very early universe. For example, the multiverse and inflation. Moreover, it might be inevitable even in our own universe if it expands forever. And I have some additional stuff here, but I guess that I should stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shimon. You actually have one more minute if you want to start on it, but we can also open up to questions if there's any questions in Zoom.
Yes, Ephraim, please.
Yes, several years ago, I think, Dr. Leonard Susskind gave a very interesting lecture on the holographic principle, and through that, he actually one explanation, and he said, well, why the Boltzmann brain? He said, well, actually, you could have an infinite number of universes, etc. But he says, but the holographic principle would kill it because of like a reflection thing in which you're sort of trapped in a limited, so to speak, repeat performance. I'm not doing it justice, and I couldn't do it justice. Then he went ahead with this more abstract theory, which he said was very speculative, to try to explain, beyond that. Do you have any feelings or comments on this?
Well, actually, I don't have anything to say about that. I should say that this doesn't fall within my expertise. I mean, BB is something that I was interested in, and I learned especially for this talk. Lenny Susskind is, of course, very, very respectable physicist, and he has many ideas. I think that, to the best of my knowledge, he doesn't rule out the idea of BBs. I think that many physicists of his type that doing the multiverse thing and everything, they actually use BB as a diagnostic tool, and many of them admit that they don't have any solution to this problem. By the way, I think that I met you many, many years ago in LA, but this is a different story. Talk to you later about it. Yes, any other questions?
Yes, Professor Ephraim.
Thank you very much again for a really very nice presentation. Second one. And my question is, it is still not clear if and how the hypothesis of BB could be experimentally checked. As far as I understand, it's only the outcome of all the existent theories. But you have also mentioned that probably one can think about some kind of experimental checking of this.
Right. So this is a problem when you combine to say perception of reality with physics. It's always problematic. I mean, how can you check that? I mean, there are many kind of arguments like the dream, all these skeptic hypotheses or skeptic, how do you call it, paradoxes are things that you cannot really test because they are, how should I put it? It's something that go to the, undermine our understanding of the perception of reality. So and this is actually, it may sound like a very nice and cute intellectual game, but actually physics should explain all the things should be so solid. I mean, at least in my understanding, that eventually we should find an answer to this question. I think that we don't really know what consciousness is. We don't really know, at least describe, at least in physics, what perception of reality is. There are many open questions, and this kind of it brings us to the level of maybe philosophy or cognitive science and everything. And if you combine that with physics, it becomes a mess. I mean, so I agree that currently you cannot really rule this out, but you also cannot rule out you cannot falsify the idea that you are not a Boltzmann brain, that you have a body. I mean, because as I said earlier, you feel your legs and hands, but you feel that in your brain. How do you know that they do exist physically?
Thank you for the questions. Are there any more questions on Zoom? Okay, I hope you'll have enough time to answer my question. It was inspired by your previous presentation. I got really inspired by the equations that you were presenting, and they looked as patterns. So I was wanting to ask about the use of visualization and art in teaching science. As an educator, it's very important in how you can teach it. I was also very inspired by your storytelling now on the Boltzmann Brain. So I'd be happy to hear more about that now and maybe later.
Actually, I have no experience with using art in explaining physics or at least illustrating physics in this way. So if this was your intention, yeah, so sorry to say that I have nothing to offer at this point. Doesn't fall within my expertise.
Okay, well, that made it easy because now we are right at the time to move on to our next panelist, which is Svetlana Yashchuk. She is a candidate of psychological sciences, associate professor at the Brest State University, and she'll be speaking about the psycho-emotional well-being as a complex and integral indicator of the quality of life. Please, Professor.
Уважаемые участники третьей международной научной конференции, мне хочется...
I would like to congratulate us on the beginning of this conference, where I'm a participant for the first time. And this is a wonderful conference that answers the question of the entire humanity about how to resolve the global questions and challenges through the integration of society, science, and culture, and how to ensure a quality of life in the future world, which is so unstable and unpredictable. And I'm grateful and glad to see such people in this gathering who are aimed at searching solutions to how to make this world a better place. And I want to start with the words about love. Love is like alchemics. Love is the healing tool. Love cannot live in egoism. Love is what all alchemists are searching. Love is what creates life on earth. Everyone should go the path towards the absolute love, because love is what connects, revives, and gives meaning to all, and unites the entire world. These words to my life are extremely important, and as well as to the people whom I interact with. For the recent 40 years, I've been working as a teacher, as a professor at the university. I teach psychology, and I'm involved in all kinds of activities, not only as a teacher, but also as a researcher. And I'm questioning, I'm researching such global questions as to how to organize human being, the life of a human being in society in a proper way. And these questions are especially important nowadays when the life of an average human being is so unsecure and unpredictable. Everybody wants to be happy and organize life in a quality way, but it is more and more hard to figure out how to accomplish this. A lot of important researchers like from Laszlo and many others have been paying attention to these questions, and they in general, they come up with two conclusions: that for the quality of life, we need two things: psychological safety or security of the environment, and psychological stability of a person. So, in order to ensure safety to a particular person, the social security in the surrounding environment is required. But if we just take a look at the reality of nowadays world, we will see that there are lots of global factors that make it unsecure and break this condition of social security, including the pandemic, including wars, tyrannies, and so on. So the second trend, or the second aspect, is the psychological security of a person. And the previous participants have been talking about the importance of environment that surrounds a person, that is supposed to provide resources to a person. But besides the environment, there is also the personal life or internal life of a human being. And in order to ensure the quality of life of a human being and internal stability, again, a person has to be in a proper connection with the surrounding environment. And how can it be how can it be healthy quality if most of these interactions only promise hurt and injury? Currently, we have a generation of people who are tired of life, insecure, uncertain about the future. And if we look at this problematic as a fact, we observe a person who has no resources of his or her own, has bad connection to the environment, has no inner or outside stability. Such person is doomed to struggle to survive, doomed to see a decline in the quality of one's life. And what we have at the end of the day is the fact that we have each has an environment that would be supposed to provide the resources for quality life, and at the same time, and it doesn't, right? And at the same time, the person finds him or herself in front of nowadays in front of the condition where he doesn't or she doesn't know where to turn to, whom to run to for help. And going deeper in trying to understand the reasons why a person suffers is it's the emotional sphere. The most popular emotion, or the most common emotion that people demonstrate and manifest when they turn to a specialist for help is fear, anguish. And nowadays it's very common to for people to be to be unsatisfied and unhappy with the way they feel, the way their emotional sphere works. And the researchers in this field note or point out that nowadays a human being becomes more and more insecure or vulnerable in the vulnerability is related to the emotional sphere mostly. And we've been, with our colleagues, we've been paying a lot of attention to the ways to support emotional stability or security of a human being nowadays. So every person has many aspects in life, including intellectually explainable, but what we really can provide support to and what we can ensure for any person, no matter what his or her social status and his and his the things he does or she does in life, is namely the emotional sphere. And we find that the things that we do, the way we act, the results we accomplish, all depend on the way we feel. Meaning, emotional sphere has a very powerful impact upon all the results that we get in life. Besides that, any problems in emotional life can have a very devastating and very powerful negative impact upon all the corporeal, material, and intellectually results that transpire in intellectual sphere. For example, from showed that no matter how hard the conditions the person finds himself or herself in, emotional stability can ensure survival. What we've come up with is the system of conscious transformation, conscientious transformation. So we've built a model, and and it's based mostly on the existential and quantum psychology, and currently we have a very special interest for integration or integrative psychology. I think with that we will be able to broaden it and reinforce it or make it stronger with using all kinds of different methodologies. And in the center of our model is what we have defined as rules that we can use in the process of tuition, or no, not tuition, of education. The first rule that we have been learning is being present. A person should be present in the moment and live the moment through by ways of managing one's attention. And this is the second rule. If you want to walk, walk. If you want to take something, take it. If you want to, and so on. Don't get dispersed in thousands of actions and activities. And don't let the chaos take over you. And as soon as the person starts being focused, he or she starts getting involved in all activities fully. And the third rule that comes from it is the rule of being conscientious, be conscious about what you are. These rules allow or help the person to get back to the self. The being conscious about the world helps the person start understanding and feeling how his or her emotions actually work, what the principles are that guide the person in life, and how and why the person finds him or herself and in this and that situation right now. We realize by now that a person's life is managed by a lot of cues and reasons and processes that are not noticeable and on the surface, but they have a very great impact upon a human's life. And some of them can be coming from deep childhood and not be conscious at all. Once the person realizes or becomes conscious about those, aware of those elements, his or her life starts changing, sometimes dramatically. And I think that even those who are listening now realize that in our life we have situations when we are happy, glad, uplifted, everything goes well and comes out good. If we are oppressed or depressed or any other bad feeling, we get worse results. Another aspect of those same three rules and their usage is becoming responsible for every way you feel at every moment. The program that we have developed, the educational program that we have developed, consists of 6 modals, and at each step, at each modal, we work with people, helping them become aware, become conscious about his or her internal world, not only to understand the world around the person, but first and foremost, to understand the world inside the person. A little by little, on the course of our education, a person starts internalizing some rules, a set of rules, that help him or her realize that such good things as happiness, joy, love, understanding, or compassion can be brought about to one's life on one's decision, meaning it's he or she who is empowered to decide what his life will be filled with, and it's very important. Another thing that we help people to realize is that it's very important to be responsible for one's life, meaning all the activities, all the emotions one feels, all the outcomes produced by those actions and emotions. Every activity is regarded as a investment that can produce corresponding results. Another another rule is the rule of reflection. We have already heard here today that your surrounding influence impacts what you will be getting, what you will be feeling. Besides that, we learn the rule or the law of energy, the presence of energy that manages all in the world, and we have not learned how to measure it so far. So to sum it up, what we are actually doing is working with groups and teaching them all these things, and we also research the people who study with us and observe the fact that a person can bring about any change he or she wants in his or her life if one starts working on oneself. And the main thing in the very center of this process of change, as we find it, is love. The notion that I've started this presentation with. Love cannot ruin anything. Love only builds, and it helps one to realize the world as one whole and be aware of the wholeness of the universe, and becomes the basis and the foundation for happy, aware, and abundant life. Once our life gets filled with this feeling, this attitude, it becomes happy. So what I have presented to you today is the outcomes, some outcomes of our practice, of our activity, me and my team, and we're certain that we can implement all the same methods and get all the same outcomes in any place in the world, because our team consists of people who are based in all different locations around the world. I'm very grateful to the organizers of today's conference for making it possible to talk about these important things and share experience and share our outcomes, and share what can be accomplished just if we pay attention to these foundations, such as love, responsibility, and all the things I mentioned. It's very important to have you, and it's very important to have for us to have each other, that people who are really aware and really caring about development and bring about change in the world. It doesn't matter what your profession is. Your main profession is the human being.
Thank you very much, Professor Yashchuk. We have time for one question, so we will go straight to Professor
Мы переходим к профессору Лео.
Большое спасибо, Света, за такую очень интересную и эмоциональную презентацию. Я бы хотел бы узнать, является ли ваша методика частью академического.
Like to ask if your method is a part of your academic course that you give in at your university, and if so, if there are any scientific publications or articles, papers that you have published based on it, and how many people have already gone through this program. Thank you for the question. So we have only started our practical implementation path. We have been moving towards it for a recent 10 years, but thousands of people have been already through elements of this process. But currently, we are leading a group of several tens of people. Let's say 40 graduates are going to be in the nearest future, and we'll let you know the results. And as for the methodological publications or papers, we're also working on them, and you will know about them when they're published, of course. And the main thing we think is that people who go through our education become more stable, more happy. They realize their life in a more proper way. They start living full lives, having all they really want to be there. Even healthier. Only 2 people from the course caught COVID-19 and went through it very lightly. We also have some plan or idea or desire to use more precise technique, or more precise tools to measure the changes. It is very hard to decide how to measure the change of state, the change of emotional status, so as to show the real possibility and power of the method. I hope that I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, professors. We'll have to continue right away with our next speaker. If you could please mute so we will be able to continue. So yes, now I'll introduce Dr. Elliot Pines, with a PhD from the University of California. I'll let you get right into it, Professor. Dr. Elliot Pines.
All right. Thank you. And I apologize in advance to translation. It's going to be a little bit fast and furious to cover everything properly. Oh, I'm locked out from screen share right now.
Translators, could you please let Professor Yashchuk that she's still screen sharing? Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. Let me try it this way. Not the best. Okay, I think that works. I hope everybody's getting the screen clearly.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Welcome to Stone, Paper, Scissors, Adaptive Child's Play. This children's game is actually of Chinese origin, evolved through a long later history in Japan. The rules are deceptively simple. Here shown in a clockwise cycle of conquest. Scissors cut paper, paper traps stone or rock, and stone or rock crushes scissors. Other modern versions include 5 elements, as any odd number works to keep the odds balanced, with the same number of possibilities beaten by your choice as beating your choice. As you likely know, while stone, paper, scissors is a name in use, the common name, as indicated in the slide, is rock, paper, scissors. I have specifically chosen the minority form, as while generally formed by natural erosion, a stone's smoothness has a human-made sense of design purpose, as do scissors and paper. So categorizing, I feel to be the first psychological step in the further evolution of this game for the children of an integral world. What I mean here will hopefully become clear as we proceed. This simple game hides a sophisticated mathematical principle, a sort of statistical paradox that began to be unraveled in the 18th century by the Marquise de Condorcet, with its full implication only realized in the 20th century, where it was used to secretly manipulate the odds in elections and competitive sports. In fact, the paradox renders an isolated internal comparison or competition ever more vague and ultimately impossible as an integral system evolves in size and complexity. Note, though, that true paradox in the mathematical sense is only possible, in fact required, with the nullification of logic in the face of axiomaless, boundless infinity that logic inevitably leads to. Take, for example, Galileo's paradox, as shown in the slide. The perfect squares are an infinitesimal subset of the whole numbers, and yet are in one-to-one correspondence with them. However, at no point along that road do the laws of nature, of cause and consequence, ever cease. We just discover deeper roots and higher branches. There is no real paradox in the finite, but there is also no limit to the depth and breadth of those laws. And inevitably, our mental map of reality breaks down, and we must course correct it. Trained from childhood in comparisons based upon single aspects of an isolated relationship, we can be fooled by the multidimensional nature of real objects, including people, especially in the relationship to other members of the system as a whole, and the surrounding environment, the broader system. Indeed, the whole is greater than the linear sum of its parts. This is why, in system thinking, independent perfection is a detriment to the whole and ultimately the part itself. We note that cancer is the perfect independent cell that would live forever were it not for killing its host and so itself. This is one aspect of the system's adage, perfect is the enemy of good enough. We'll return to this theme a couple of times. A quantitatively symmetric version of a basic 2D anchored non-transitivity, just to give an example, is this 4-die set discovered by Stanford University statistician Bradley Efron in 1970. The next in the cycle will beat the previous one with 2-to-1 odds. The two dimensions in this case are how large the numbers on a given die are and how many large ones there are compared with the competitor. Returning to stone, paper, scissors, one wonders if this wheel of fortune can't spin the other way as well. Offhand, yes, but it's simply the negative of the primary direction. Instead of who beats who, it becomes who is beaten by who. Thus far, this classic law of the jungle game has only evolved further in its ever-hardening egoistic paradigm, much like humanity itself until now. Earlier versions went back to nature and at least took the form, specifically in the early Japanese version of Mushiken, of ecological balance in its harshness. However, if the ultimate goal of systemization was homeostasis of subsystems through continuous destruction of their parts, the non-existence of the finite itself, ab initio, would have been, well, infinitely more efficient. Let's see if there isn't hidden within a broader non-transitivity here, a benevolent systemization, bidirectional in the simple game model, and every which way in a still larger dimensionality. A stone can pound bent scissors back into shape and sharpen the blades, remove creases from paper and help it stay in place. Paper can smooth a stone paperweight and gift wrap it. Gift wrap scissors and provide art material to work with. Scissors can cut paper dolls to delight a child or beautiful artwork and decorations. Cleave facets into gemstone, greatly enhancing the beauty and value. All lovely thoughts, but is this the reality of our world? Yes, and ever more crucially so. There are 4 ideas about a system that I think we should discuss at this point. Firstly, there is a purpose, to satisfy the initial desire. Of course, if that beginning isn't fundamental, or if that end isn't an ultimate, all-inclusive closed loop, in short, infinity, then the system in question is only a subsystem of the finite. More generally, finite means connections cannot be zero, infinitesimal. Thus, even if under the radar screen, everything is connected, even components and systems that might be still hidden from our senses and minds. It also means nonlinearity and universal fractal geometry of structure and dynamics. Specifically regarding the node interconnect abstraction of systems, this means scale-free networks everywhere you look, even above space and time, as realized in the relatively recent amplitude-hedron theory in physics. Paradoxically, this implies ever-growing practical diverse complexity towards an abstract simple unity. One result of this is the nearly asymptotic fit of larger, more complex systems with a failure rate function discovered by Walody Weibel about 90 years ago, but not published by him for close to 2 decades. And he was a cautious proponent of it even then, being such a radical approach for the time. Industry and the military also took a lot of convincing to use it. Only decades still later did it come to be fully understood theoretically and empirically, becoming ever more useful as system sizes grew. This function is a generic, empirically fit fractal. Present research indicates that using a mixture of fractal functions can pull the asymptote closer in for finite systems. And in fact, the alpha fit parameter of the Weibel function itself changes over the typical life history of a system, forming the well-known bathtub reliability curve seen to the right in the slide. Secondly, there is equifinality. And for subsystems, this can appear as an independent and imperfect homeostasis. One can be fooled by such a subsystem regarding its true support purpose, goal, and certainly regarding the what, where, and when to judge success or failure. Until working in systems engineering, I, like many, naively thought the statement, perfect is the enemy of good enough, to be a call for mediocrity. Quite the contrary, this applies to a part in a greater system. Good enough for the part is generally optimal for contribution to the system as a whole, not to mention development budget and schedule for that system, and even for reaching quality excellence of that system. More on this when we talk about what is known as the Pareto distribution. Thirdly, there are, so to speak, 4 worlds, levels of abstraction applying to system description. A, nominal, names born of the initial diversity into separate nodes, components to be connected into the system. B, ordinal, establishing a sequence in space-time information, hierarchy network connections for the nodes. C, interval, adding measures of the differences implicit in the ordering connections. And D, ratio absolute, adding relative values to the nodes or possibly setting absolute values by defining a 0. The first set, A and B, constitute the qualitative aspects. The second set, C and D, the quantitative aspects. Fourthly and finally, there are 2 alternate structures that are the main alternative structures that are the mainstay of level B amidst the array of interconnections: asymmetric linear series and symmetric circular parallel structures. What we might call, in terms of industrial organization systems, hierarchical factory, that is management to workers, and team, equal level group, respectively. Interscale communication can lead to a middle line of evolution between them, as the formation of integrated product teams, IPTs, can happen in industry. The subsystem evolution in this, by its fractal orbit chaotic nature, has its butterfly effect. However, this is not one of exponentially growing entropy, but rather local feedback to adjust global development. In short, it is information exchange. There's also a kind of analogy here in the mathematical physics of light, the interplay from source onward of divergent and curling electric magnetic fields with their space and time variations, leading to the spreading of light and the information that it carries. In the 19th century, Sir Francis Dalton discovered, in contradiction to his own social Darwinist thinking, the principle of collective intelligence, in common parlance, wisdom of the crowd. He discovered this through the mean value of his experiment, but published based upon the median, although his mean was 9 times as accurate. In fact, review of his data proved that he was mistaken. The actual mean of the data was even more accurate than he thought. Nonetheless, his reason was that, as a method, the median proves more stable in the limit of few people. In this regard, let's make another important fractal observation of systems, which, on a deeper observation, has notable similarity to the Weibel function. The Pareto distribution, from the first early 20th century empirical study of human wealth distribution by Vilfredo Pareto, his observation of an approximately 20-80 rule of thumb in the case of amassed wealth remains fairly accurate in the face of more precise mathematical formulation of later theoretical development. To explain, 20% of a population tends to hold 80% of the wealth of that population. Further analysis demonstrates this to be a fractal. So 20% of that 20% tends to hold 80% of that 80%, and so forth. It is found that this rule applies not only to all human systems, say percentage responsibility for successes or failures for certain types of projects in a large organization, but to the subsystems down to elementary components of any large system. We return to another dimension of perfect is the enemy of good enough, this being, per the point on the lower right corner of the slide, getting at the last 20% of your part perfect would take 80% of your time. Don't do it. In regard to collective intelligence systems, this would seem to be aligned with Dalton's stable median, in regard to individuals at the right time, right place, and or with the right expertise with some finite volume in the space of possible systems. We do find, however, that while the median region people might provide, say, 80% of what we need for a given task or question, full communication expands into wisdom of the crowd. And for larger crowds, especially, we could approach 100% capture. However, something much grander awaits. For one thing, it seems that modular structure within a group helps. Though this eliminates some information, much of that is noise due to random local variations and small local gradients of long-range biases, including legitimate, unique environmental information that is, however, irrelevant to the decision at hand. The result is a potential rise in accuracy proportional to subgroup number. That is when it's equal to the square root of the total group number. It's a maximum curve, as seen in the chart on the left. The chart on the right represents A, the tendency in animal groups and, in fact, scale-free networks in general to form strong local interactions and weak subgroup representative interactions with other subgroups, leading to a sort of Republican versus purely Democratic full group decision-making process. B, a simple model of this is a two-tier structure. And C, a theoretical microexample of how this Republican process leads to lower information. A 5-4 majority black vote on a tier 1 becomes a 2-1 majority white vote on the final decision tier 2 result. For another thing, there can be more tiers than this model indicates. And for still another, their internality may be more complex. And for a third, all these may be dynamic and problem-solving ideation, situation dependent. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I got a problem here. Rashad, I'm trying to get, there is a video I'm trying to get going there, but I unfortunately I can't. It's taking too much time. Oh my goodness. Okay, we are going to lose that, unfortunately. It's just showing, it's a very nice video, and it shows the flow. Oh.
Dr. Pines, you have about 1 minute left, so maybe you can start summing
up. Oh my
up.
goodness. Well, that includes questions. I need like 17 and a half, 18 minutes. Do I still have a few minutes going into the questions?
Yeah, you still have about 5 more minutes with the questions.
Yeah, I'd like to use some of that. It's important. I'm sorry, because I had a very, very nice, oh, wait, there it is. All right, let me go as quickly as possible. Recalling those 4 worlds of a system, we might think of our collective intelligence at the nominal level, allegorically, as a higher dimensional symmetric polyhedron, and from ordinal level down as its projection onto a lower dimensional space, specifically the identical sides making up the hypersurface, one less dimension of the object, project asymmetrically into the lower dimensional spaces. This concept is represented on the slide for the cube onto the plane and the tesseract 4D hypercube onto 3-dimensional space. The video covers this better with some more general projections to help clarify the matter. Though still leaving out the full asymmetry of the vast majority, there are higher dimensional objects still that projected down into our space give even far more complex possibilities. The point is that the sides of the higher dimensional objects are all equal in the absolute generality of their nominal state, so to speak, but project into complex specific forms in optimal response to specific direction of a question or task. The entire group form a map back to the global origin, but here, from one to a minority of sides may alone form the essential outline, the Pareto 80%. Move on. We note that a fractal C can become the root of an even greater, more complex projection or unfolding into lower dimensions with a vast kaleidoscope of universes spread across the variations of the constant ruling over its formulation. Now let's look at the most densely complex natural network system in the known universe. It's inside your own head. An amazing discovery was made in 2017. Not only is the brain fractally tiered as any complex system, but it uses modules, at least at tier 1, that are multidimensional structures. These are typically up to 7 dimensions, but even up to 11 dimensions have been found. Of course, our brains can only offer a 3D space for these, so it is rather a 3D shadow network of what would topologically correspond to higher dimensional structures. What is particularly amazing is the integral communication in the brain's network that rapidly assembles such a complex as needed for whatever challenge is posed, with asymmetric interconnection weighting developed as appropriate to the task. It is also noteworthy by analogy that in the archetypal Hopfield neural network, while a root system of n nodes can be weight programmed to only hold a set of information proportional to n squared down to less than n, the number of possible sets, problems that it can deal with, is proportional to 2 to the n divided by that number. In terms of collective intelligence, this would mean that essentially every node will have its place in the totality of the system's situations, perhaps many times over, to be crucial to the success of the whole. Finally, these past decades have been noteworthy in regard to concretizing the road to artificially intelligent mechanism being able to ultimately take over, or at least radically simplify all human occupations but one: social transformation and cohesion in the face of new realities. It is here in particular that countless projected systems could occur in the acceleration of what we might call the globalization singularity. In nature, emergent integral communication has led to amazing self-arrangements in communal problem solving and tasking. If we learn from early on to look toward our mutual responsibility rather than selfish competition, if we unleashed humanity from the destructive selfishness of our individual and subgroup egos, would we not be free to aspire to a new form of integral communication, especially available to cells composed of the human genius? If our stone, paper, scissors worked in every direction to bestow mutual benefit, would not the humanity mind shine in the higher light of a bright future for all and each, every individual gaining unique importance in this interaction beyond whatever we could now imagine? So let us begin with today's children, so that these adults of the future might at least be able to solve the problems that we left them, and hopefully innovate better, holistic ways so as to manifest a truly good destiny. Don't we owe them that much?
Thank you, Dr. Pines. We have 1 minute left for questions specifically for Dr. Pines, and then we will move on to general Q&A. So if there's any questions from our Zoom participants. Okay, so we will take one from some of the written down questions that we have. And the question is, what is the trick of, or let's talk about what you just spoke about right at the end. Let's take that question. Is it possible to transfer the model of this game, the rock, paper, scissors, to the development of human relations?
Yes, I think so. The example I gave in oh dear, I can't switch back to the Greek gift, but where I showed actually the hand showing different sharing. In other words, if we go both ways, we take a positive aspect, and this is a model for children. How we could share. In fact, it's an interesting game. How would you take these things and more competitively? I would even go to as I said, there's a 5 version, larger versions one to start with, and one involves Mr. Spock and something else. It's interesting to have like 5 levels, and then how do you turn that into instead of a negative sort of thing? How could you turn that into mutual help? In other words, they are great because they give, and by the way, it goes both ways because the other way gives too. How do we combine these things? And then finally, how they give to every component, not just the immediate ones to each side of the circle. And you begin to develop that dimensionality. It's something to be developed, yeah, but I think there's a lot of potential in it.
Thank you, Dr. Pines. We will continue with Kelechi's question. Would you like to ask it yourself, Professor Kelechi?
Yes, thank you. Professor, this is amazing, actually. I'm really impressed, and I'm thinking of how I can use it, because most people use this game like rock, paper, scissors. How could I simply, not too scientifically, use this to explain to children the idea of collective sharing?
Well, I think it's interesting. It's almost automatic. They understand. It's just not stated. This non-transitivity paradox. Which basically already if ab initio says, is something interesting. Their challenge, they just, especially go in second grade and they've gotten greater than or equals. And you ask what is the concept? That something is always greater than or equal to I remember for second grade school project, I helped my son. And what we did was a little scenario where the kids were, that a mathematician was going to come and talk about this idea. And he was beginning to, and he said, that's silly. What are you talking about? Three is greater than 2 and less than 4. You can't change that. And he said, okay, I have this set of 4 die, which is the die I talked about, right? I'd like you to do a little thing for me. I'm going to come back next week. Why don't you tell me which die is better than which? See which dies are weaker. And order me. This is the best die. This is the worst, etc. Go ahead. And they go crazy. They go, they thought they get it first, and then it contradicts. Wait a minute, this can't be. They play across, and it's random. And by the way, it gets extremely complicated. I have one paper on that. One reference to that in my paper. It was interesting, done by middle school, high school students working with faculty at faculty at MIT. It's a very, very interesting program there. And they really got it. And like all the complexities of this thing. And so it's not such a simple question, is it? It becomes who's better than who? And that's not necessarily in a complex system. We're losing definition here. I mean, in physics, you have an analogy. It was the first time you come in contact that you have what was called father theory, which was a one multi-dimensional theory that had a 10th and 11th dimension, which were both of time. You say, wait, how's the time a ball? How can time be a 2-dimensional surface? Which way is, where's, I know where I am, but where's past, future, and past? It begins to lose meaning. It fades out. So I think it's a very good, introduction. Kids can really understand this. You can do it tangibly. You have the die as you would have markers and such. And even grade school kids can really pick up on this and can develop in something very, very interesting. Thanks for the question. It's a very, very good one.
Thank you, Dr. Pines and Professor Kelechi. We have now our general Q&A session. We only have Professor Svetlana Yashchuk and Dr. Leia Pines here with us. So if you have any questions on Zoom for either Professor Yashchuk or Dr. Pines, please open your mics and ask. If not, we have some from social media that we'll get to. Okay, so we will continue with a question for Professor Yashchuk. I just would like to double check, do you have a translation?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we do have translation. Thank you.
Okay. So the question is from social media from Nina. Is it possible that a change in the perception of reality will become a necessary element of the implementation of a system to improve the physical and mental safety of a person in accordance with your approach? Okay, I will repeat the question. It's from Nina from social media. Is it possible that a change in the perception of reality will become a necessary element of the implementation of a system to improve the physical and mental safety of a person in accordance with your approach, Professor Yashchuk?
Светлана, вопрос вам звучит так. В соответствии с вашим подходом, возможно ли изменение восприятия реальности?
Is it possible that the change in reality will be a necessary element in ensuring personal and social security of a person? Thank you. Yeah, my name was pronounced with an accent, so I didn't hear. But yeah, I've been thinking about psychosomatic effect of this. Every person has a body. Every person gets born as a body, and this is the first thing that we have. We all understand what logic is, but the first thing we get in life is body. And once a person starts changing one's beliefs, this hardwiring that he has in his body will start helping him. And our basic nature is built to run on different triggers and reactions, right? And these reactions are also managed by inhibiting mechanisms in our brain. And I've been thinking about what establishes this difference between people in terms of activity or reflectiveness. And it became obvious to me that once a person starts more aware, this proper usage of activation and inhibition mechanisms in one's brain in one's somatic system becomes very natural. And just see how observe how many theories of life production or life creation have been created and failed. Meaning, if you put together all the elements that there are in a living cell, you will never get a living cell if it's not actually living in the first place. Only a person can become revitalized or revived through a change in his or her emotional and internal life. We also observe this effect with the children that get born with allergic syndrome, and we wonder how come a child has allergy from the very start of her life. And the answer is that parents have to be healed from allergy and not children. We also have to understand that the change doesn't take place immediately. We come through a long process of change, and that was also that way for me. I also had somatic diseases that were chasing me, and I started working on myself and changing my emotional sphere and changing the way I become aware of myself, and everything started to change. But it's a process, and that's the same with this pandemic that wise men say that it will be it is here to stay with us until we find a way to change the way we relate to one another and the way we organize our internal emotional life, so as to only then will we be able to put end to this pandemic. So yes, maybe I'm answering too emotionally, but this is the way I feel, and this is according to the results that we get. I've also worked with people who had cancer, and they got healed, because the basics for their cancer is their being offended, the feeling of being indulged, and we come to the conclusion that once you start stalking for the reasons a person has a cancer or any disease of this kind, you gradually get deeper to one's emotional sphere and discover that the reason for that disease was a lack of love. And the same in simple interaction when we try to compare people between them. It's same as comparing colors. Can you compare green to blue? It's same as with people. Every person is unique.
Я ответила на вопрос, то я могу еще дальше.
Have I answered your question? Or else I can speak more? Tell me stop if something.
Yes, we do have another question from Alina. And the question is, how does the external reality change after a person acquires this resource of love? How effective could this be with children? I think these are actually two different questions. So let's start with the first one. How soon does the external reality change after a person acquires the resource of love? The question will also be in Zoom in Russian.
Насколько эффективно? Я поняла, спасибо за вопрос. Я не просто, я понимаю.
Okay, thank you. I understood the question. We've been ready for this question, and we also have that question actually. And I want to say that it depends on the extent of internal readiness or preparedness for being open with oneself, and the amount or the number of traumas and troubles that the person has been in or has actually. I will give you an example. A person comes to me, and the problem with this person is that he is aggressive with his own children, or her children. And we start researching and find that when she was a child, she was a little girl, she was treated in a way that they caused her good things, they made her suffer good things in her life, meaning they gave her something that was meant to be valuable, but they gave it in such a form that she suffered. And now that she's already a mother herself, she realizes that she cannot be good with her child. And it comes out that the reason for that is that her parents, when she was a girl, were so offensive with her and so aggressive, so to say, that they tried to do something good for her, but in such a bad way, improper way. So when I'm talking about the non-violent interaction, the idea behind it is very powerful, because the more person becomes aware of the cause and effect in his or her emotional life, the more controlled his activities in terms of aggression and compassion and all these things become. One more thing that we teach our disciples to do is to reframe all the negative things into positive things. We teach that you will not see anything good or positive in the world around you until you learn to learn to love yourself and to accept yourself. How to accelerate was the question. I want to say that it's impossible, because every person has to go through a process. It all takes time. With children, it happens very quickly. We have done a number of lessons with children also, and we realize that they start changing and start teaching their parents also after that. They start helping their parents to change their emotional sphere. And we also created an instrument that is called the triple resource of love. This is love for yourself, love for the parents, and love for the people around. The love for God comes after this, later. In the first place, one has to learn how to love those who he or she can be aware of. It is himself, his parents, and those around. So I can't say that it can happen overnight. It's a process, but the final revelation or opening happens very quickly, abruptly.
Thank you, Professor Svetlana Yashchuk. We will move to Professor Efraim Eliav for closing remarks. Thank you very much for all of our participants and all of our viewers on YouTube and Facebook. Professor Eliav, please.
Thank you very much. We really came to just the finalizing of our meeting. We have 2 days of very intensive presentation, roundtable discussion, and panel questions and answers. And I would like to thank all presenters. We have 13 talks covering different aspects of integral scientific approach to nature, to human society. And we have 12 speakers from 10 different countries. Actually, in our IWRI Institute, we have much more nations involved. And I would like just share with you the very last slide of my presentation about our institute. You can see here the mail that you can apply to us, and we are really ready to share with you our vision and our goals. And there are many different kind of interesting projects going on in our institute, and you are very welcome to join us. And I would like also to just stop sharing. Okay. Just thank all the brilliant IWRI team which made the conference possible. First of all, I would like to thank our scientific organization committee, Professor Valentina Erganaeva and Miss Vanessa Erganaeva, for just making the scientific part of our conference so nice and excellent. Then we have a really great production team, which is headed by Jana Allen. She's also responsible for all the translators, and Irina Rudnev as well. We have excellent broadcasting team, which is headed by Justin Bloom, and also there are Viktor Kamnech and Pavel Sviridenko involved. And I will also would like to thank our SMAC team, which is headed by Katie Pirella, and many others who really very heavily involved. I just have no time, but believe me that our conference is just the product of our integral work of our integral team. Thank you very much, and you are very welcome to join our future conferences as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.